When Natalie Carrington, the ruthless CEO worth $500 million, whispered her most dangerous question to a quiet stranger at the company gala, she expected him to fall at her feet like every other man in that glittering ballroom. Instead, Ethan Walker looked her straight in the eye and walked away. The first person in a decade who didn't want anything from her. What she didn't know was that this unassuming data analyst carried a secret that would shatter everything she believed about power, success, and what it truly means to be strong. If you want to see how a single father's promise changed the life of the most powerful woman in the city, stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The Prometheus Hotel glittered like a jewel box that Thursday evening, its crystal chandeliers casting fractured light across 500 of the city's most influential people. The annual Carrington Group Gala wasn't just a corporate event, it was an exhibition of power, where CEOs measured their worth in handshakes and hedge fund managers traded secrets over 30-year scotch. Natalie Carrington stood near the main staircase in a midnight blue gown that had cost more than most people's monthly salary, accepting congratulations with the practiced smile of someone who'd learned long ago that warmth was just another tool in the arsenal of leadership. At 42, she commanded the room without effort, not because of the dress or the diamonds at her throat, but because of the empire she'd built with her own hands. "Magnificent speech, Ms. Carrington," Gerald Thornton said, appearing at her elbow with a champagne flute in each hand. The investment banker's cologne preceded him like a warning. "The quarterly earnings report was impressive, but hearing you talk about the future of sustainable tech, that's what separates visionaries from accountants." Natalie accepted the glass he offered, though she had no intention of drinking it. "You're too kind, Gerald. How's the merger coming along?" "We'll have papers ready by Monday." He leaned closer, lowering his voice to what he probably imagined was an intimate tone. "You know, I've been thinking about what you said at the shareholder meeting last month, about strategic partnerships. Perhaps we could discuss some possibilities over dinner sometime? Just the two of us, somewhere quieter than these circus shows." There it was, the inevitable pivot from business to barely disguised proposition. Natalie had fielded hundreds of these attempts over the years, men who saw her success as a challenge to overcome, as if betting the CEO would somehow validate their own importance. "I'll have my assistant check my calendar," she said smoothly, which they both knew meant never. "If you'll excuse me, Gerald, I should make the rounds." She moved through the crowd with fluid efficiency, shaking hands and exchanging pleasantries, her mind already on the acquisition meeting scheduled for tomorrow morning. The gala was necessary theater, a chance to remind the business world that Carrington Group remained at the top of the food chain. But Natalie had never enjoyed these performances. Too much false intimacy, too many people wanting pieces of her attention. Natalie. Rebecca Morrison, the CFO, materialized beside her with slightly flushed cheeks. "Have you tried the oysters? They're incredible. Also, James Henderson is here from TechWise Industries. He's been asking about you." "Of course he has," Natalie murmured. "What does he want?" "What they all want. A chance to pitch you while pretending it's social conversation." Rebecca grinned. "Speaking of which, there's someone you should meet. New acquisition from the data analytics division. Brilliant guy, apparently. David Chen says he's revolutionized their forecasting models." Natalie's interest sharpened marginally. She'd built Carrington Group by recognizing talent and putting it to work. "Where is he?" Rebecca scanned the crowd, then frowned. "He was here a minute ago. Tall, dark hair, looked slightly uncomfortable in his tux. There, by the bar." Natalie followed her gaze across the ballroom to a figure standing apart from the clusters of networking executives. The man Rebecca indicated stood with his back partially to the room, studying something on his phone with an expression of mild concern. He wore his tuxedo the way most people wore borrowed clothes, correctly, but without comfort. "That's your data genius?" Natalie asked. "He looks like he'd rather be anywhere else." "David says he's brilliant with predictive analytics. Something about pattern recognition and market trend forecasting. Honestly, I didn't follow all the technical details, but the man's reports have been eerily accurate." Rebecca paused. "Though apparently he's turned down 3 different promotions in the last 18 months. Now Natalie was definitely intrigued. In her experience, ambitious people climbed ladders. People who refused promotions were either incompetent, which David Chen wouldn't tolerate, or hiding something. What's his name? Ethan Walker. Natalie watched Ethan Walker check his phone again, his brow furrowing slightly. He had the kind of face that wouldn't stand out in a crowd. Pleasant features, dark hair starting to show gray at the temples, the slight shadows under his eyes that suggested too many late nights. Nothing remarkable, except for the way he held himself completely separate from the social current flowing around him. While everyone else angled for connections and opportunities, this man looked like he was counting the minutes until he could leave. "Excuse me, Rebecca," Natalie said. "I think I'll introduce myself." She crossed the ballroom with the deliberate pace of someone who'd learned that rushing diminished authority. Several people tried to intercept her along the way, but she deflected them with promises to connect later. When she reached the bar, Ethan Walker was sliding his phone back into his pocket with a small sigh. "Mr. Walker," Natalie said. He turned, and for just a moment, she saw genuine surprise cross his face before he smoothed it into polite attention. Up close, she revised her initial assessment. He wasn't conventionally handsome, but there was something compelling about the directness of his gaze, the quiet confidence in the way he met her eyes without the usual calculation she was accustomed to seeing. "Ms. Carrington," he said, "I didn't expect, that is, good evening. Are you enjoying the gala?" She watched him carefully, reading the micro-expressions that most people didn't know they were broadcasting. "It's very impressive," Ethan said diplomatically. "The venue is beautiful, and the catering is excellent, though I imagine you're less interested in my opinion of the hors d'oeuvres and more interested in why I'm standing alone instead of networking." Natalie felt a flicker of amusement. Most employees turned into stuttering sycophants in her presence. "You're perceptive. I've heard good things about your work in data analytics. David Chen speaks highly of your forecasting models. David's generous with his praise. I just look at patterns and try to make sense of them." Ethan glanced briefly at his watch, a subtle gesture, but Natalie caught it. "The work is interesting. Interesting enough to turn down 3 promotions?" Something shifted in his expression, not discomfort exactly, but a kind of careful neutrality. "I'm satisfied with my current position." That's unusual. Most people at this company are ambitious. They want to climb higher, earn more, take on greater responsibility. Natalie tilted her head slightly. "You don't strike me as someone lacking in capability, so what is it? Fear of failure? Imposter syndrome?" "Neither," Ethan said quietly. "I'm exactly where I need to be." The certainty in his voice surprised her. Before Natalie could probe further, a familiar voice called her name from across the room. Marcus Pendleton, the chairman of the board, was gesturing for her attention with the imperious wave of someone who expected immediate compliance. Natalie suppressed her irritation. "It seems I'm needed elsewhere, but I'd like to continue this conversation, Mr. Walker. Perhaps we could schedule—" "I should actually be heading out soon," Ethan interrupted gently. "I have someone waiting for me." The statement hung in the air between them. Natalie was so accustomed to people rearranging their schedules to accommodate her that the polite refusal felt almost surreal. "Of course," she said, recovering her composure. "Well, it was interesting to meet you." "You too, Ms. Carrington." Ethan nodded politely and turned back toward the bar to settle his tab. As Natalie walked away, she found herself unusually unsettled. In a room full of people competing for her attention, the one person who hadn't wanted anything from her was the one she couldn't stop thinking about. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of strategic conversations and carefully calibrated charm. Marcus wanted to discuss the potential merger with TechWise Industries. Gerald Thornton cornered her again with thinly veiled flirtation. Rebecca pulled her into a sidebar about the upcoming board presentation. Through it all, Natalie found her attention drifting back to the quiet man who'd left early because someone was waiting for him. Who was waiting? A girlfriend? A wife? The employee file would say, but something stopped Natalie from checking immediately. She told herself it was professional curiosity. Understanding her employees' motivations made her a better leader. But the truth was something less comfortable to acknowledge. For the first time in years, someone had genuinely surprised her. Friday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn weather that made the city feel alive with possibility. Natalie's driver delivered her to Carrington Tower at 6:30, as he did every weekday, and she rode the private elevator to the executive floor with her usual coffee and newspaper. But instead of diving immediately into the acquisition files waiting on her desk, Natalie found herself opening her computer and pulling up the employee database. Walker, Ethan, age 32, data analyst, level 3. Department, predictive analytics, start. Date, March 2021. The photograph showed the same quiet face from last night, serious expression, direct gaze, no attempt at a photogenic smile. Natalie scrolled through his employment history, finding exactly what Rebecca had mentioned. 3 separate promotion offers declined, all with the same brief explanation in the notes. Employee prefers to remain in current position. His performance reviews were exemplary. David Chen's comments read like recommendations for fast-track leadership, exceptional analytical skills, innovative approach to pattern recognition, team asset, strong communication and presentation abilities. And yet Ethan Walker arrived at work at 7:30 every morning and left at exactly 6 o'clock every evening. No late nights, no weekend hours, no travel for conferences or client meetings. He worked his 40 hours per week with clockwork precision and then disappeared. Natalie clicked through to his personal information, expecting to find the usual details that would explain everything. But the emergency contact section only listed a neighbor, Angela Martinez, and there was no spouse information, no relationship status. She sat back in her chair, tapping one manicured nail against the desktop. The mystery deepened instead of resolving. Who was waiting for him? And why did she care so much about finding out? A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called. David Chen entered, carrying a tablet and wearing the slightly harried expression of someone who'd been working since dawn. "Morning, Natalie. I've got the updated analytics report you requested for the TechWise evaluation. The numbers are better than we expected." "Good. Email me the full breakdown." Natalie hesitated, then added, "David, tell me about Ethan Walker." David's eyebrows rose. "Ethan? Did something happen at the gala last night?" "I'm curious about his work. You've consistently praised his abilities, but he's turned down every advancement opportunity. Is there something I should be concerned about? Performance issues we're not documenting?" "No, nothing like that. Ethan's probably the best analyst I've ever managed." David set his tablet on her desk and leaned against the chair. His market forecasting models have saved us millions in the last 2 years alone. He predicted the semiconductor shortage 6 months before it hit, which let us adjust our supply chain strategy. And his work on the renewable energy sector analysis that directly influenced your decision to acquire Solaris Tech, which has been incredibly profitable. Then why won't he take a promotion? David was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. I've asked him that myself. He says he's happy with his work-life balance, that he has responsibilities outside the office that matter more than career advancement. What kind of responsibilities? He's never specified. Ethan's intensely private, friendly enough with his team, but he doesn't socialize after work or share much about his personal life. David paused. Look, I'll be honest. When he first started turning down promotions, I was frustrated. I thought maybe he lacked confidence or ambition, but over time, I've come to respect it. He does excellent work, he's reliable, and he seems genuinely content. Not everyone needs to claw their way to the top to be valuable. The implicit criticism stung, though Natalie was sure David hadn't intended it that way. I'm not suggesting otherwise, I'm simply trying to understand what motivates our employees. With Ethan, it's simple. He values his time. He'll work efficiently and brilliantly during office hours, but he won't sacrifice his evenings or weekends for the company. Honestly, I wish more of my team had his boundaries. We'd probably have better retention and less burnout. After David left, Natalie sat alone in her office, watching the morning sun paint geometric patterns across her desk. The conversation bothered her in ways she couldn't quite articulate. There was an implicit judgment in David's words, the suggestion that her own choices, the sacrifices she'd made to build Carrington Group, represented some kind of imbalance. She'd given everything to this company, worked 80-hour weeks, missed family gatherings and social events, ended relationships when they demanded more time than she could spare. And what did she have to show for it? An empire. Influence. The kind of success most people only dreamed about. But who was waiting for her to come home at night? The question surfaced unbidden, and Natalie pushed it away with practiced efficiency. She had a company to run, decisions to make, hundreds of employees depending on her leadership. There was no time for philosophical introspection about work-life balance. And yet, as she opened the TechWise acquisition files, her mind kept drifting back to a quiet man who'd politely declined her attention because someone was waiting for him. The following week passed in a whirlwind of meetings, negotiations, and strategic planning. Natalie threw herself into work with renewed intensity, as if drowning her curiosity about Ethan Walker in spreadsheets and contracts would make it disappear. It didn't work. She found herself noticing him in the building, catching glimpses of him in the cafeteria at lunch, walking through the lobby at precisely 6 o'clock, always with the same purposeful stride of someone who had somewhere important to be. He moved through Carrington Tower like a ghost, present but never quite part of the ambient corporate culture. On Thursday afternoon, Rebecca stopped by Natalie's office with an unusual request. "We need an executive representative at the Oakmont Elementary School charity event tomorrow evening. It's part of our community outreach program. We're one of the major sponsors. Usually Thomas handles these things, but he's stuck in London for the merger talks." Natalie suppressed a groan. Corporate charity events were necessary public relations, but they ranked among her least favorite obligations, spending hours making small talk with parents and teachers while pretending to care deeply about bake sales and silent auctions. "Can't someone from PR go?" she asked. "They really want C-suite representation. It's good optics, shows that Carrington Group's commitment to education comes from the top." Rebecca gave her a knowing smile. "Plus, there will be press there. The mayor's supposed to make an appearance. Could be good for the company image." "Fine," Natalie sighed. "Send me the details." Friday evening found her standing in the Oakmont Elementary School gymnasium, which had been transformed with colorful banners and student artwork for the annual fundraiser. Parents milled around tables displaying various charity auction items, while children ran between displays of school projects and handmade crafts. Natalie had arrived with her assistant, Lauren, who was currently negotiating with the event organizer about photo opportunities. Left to her own devices, Natalie wandered toward a display of student artwork, studying the crayon drawings and watercolor paintings with the detached interest of someone fulfilling an obligation. The paintings were exactly what one would expect from elementary school students: houses with triangle roofs, stick figure families, rainbow-colored animals. But one piece caught her attention. It was more sophisticated than the others, showing a nighttime cityscape with careful attention to perspective and light. Buildings rose in silhouette against a purple-blue sky, and small windows glowed with yellow warmth. At the bottom, in careful child's handwriting, it read, "Waiting for Daddy," by Emma Walker, age 6. Walker. Natalie's heart rate kicked up slightly. She leaned closer, studying the painting with new interest. There was something poignant about it, the way the city loomed large and dark, while those small lit windows suggested warmth and safety. A child's perspective on urban life, filtered through obvious talent and careful observation. "That one's my favorite in the whole show," a voice said beside her. Natalie turned to find a young woman in her 20s, wearing a volunteer badge that identified her as a teacher's aide. "It's quite good," Natalie agreed. "The artist has real promise." Emma's incredibly talented. Mrs. Patterson, that's her art teacher, says she's never seen a first grader with such natural understanding of composition. The volunteer smiled. "She's the sweetest kid, too, always talking about her dad, about how he helps her practice drawing every night after dinner." Before Natalie could respond, a commotion erupted near the gymnasium entrance. A small figure in a yellow dress broke away from a group of children and sprinted across the polished floor, ponytail flying behind her. "Dad! Dad! You're here!" And there, kneeling down to catch the running child, was Ethan Walker. Natalie watched, frozen in place, as he lifted the little girl into his arms with practiced ease. The transformation in his face was stunning. The quiet, guarded expression she'd seen at the gala vanished, replaced by unfiltered warmth and joy. "Of course I'm here, Emma Bean," he said, his voice carrying across the gymnasium. "I wouldn't miss your art show for anything in the world. Now, are you going to show me this masterpiece you've been working so hard on?" "It's over there," Emma pointed excitedly toward the display where Natalie stood. Come see, come see." Ethan set her down, and she grabbed his hand, tugging him toward the artwork. As they approached, his eyes met Natalie's, and she saw the exact moment recognition hit. Surprise flickered across his face, followed quickly by something more complicated. Wariness, maybe, or resignation. "Ms. Carrington?" he said quietly. "Mr. Walker." Natalie managed to keep her voice professionally neutral, though her mind was racing. "I didn't know you had a daughter." "This is Emma," Ethan said, and the protective hand he placed on the little girl's shoulder spoke volumes about their relationship. "Emma, this is Ms. Carrington. She runs the company where Daddy works." Emma looked up at Natalie with wide hazel eyes that matched her father's. "Are you Daddy's boss?" "I suppose I am," Natalie said, feeling oddly off balance. She was accustomed to commanding boardrooms and negotiating million-dollar deals, but something about this child's direct gaze unsettled her usual confidence. "Daddy says you're very smart," Emma continued with the fearless honesty of 6-year-olds. "He says you built your whole company by yourself, which means you must work really, really hard." Natalie glanced at Ethan, who had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "I may have mentioned that," he admitted. "Well, your father is quite smart too," Natalie said, addressing Emma. "His work helps our company make important decisions." "I know. Daddy looks at lots of numbers and finds patterns." Emma tugged on Ethan's hand again. "Come on, I want to show you my painting." As Ethan allowed himself to be pulled toward the display, Natalie observed the interaction with growing fascination. The quiet, reserved analyst who'd walked away from her at the gala had transformed into an engaged, attentive father. He crouched down to Emma's height as she excitedly explained her artwork, listening with the kind of focused attention most people reserved for critical business presentations. "See, I made the buildings tall because that's how they look when we come home," Emma was saying, tracing her finger along the painted skyline. "And I put lights in the windows because those are all the other families having dinner together. And this one," she pointed to a small lit window near the bottom, "that's our apartment. That's where I wait for you when Mrs. Martinez is watching me." "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Ethan said softly. "I love how you captured the city at night. And the way you showed perspective, the buildings getting smaller in the background, that's really advanced technique." "Mrs. Patterson helped me with that part. She said I have a good eye." Emma beamed up at him. "Do you think it's good enough to win?" "I think it's a masterpiece no matter what the judges say." Ethan pulled her into a quick hug. "I'm so proud of you, Emma Bean." We were watching them together. Natalie felt something shift in her chest, an unexpected ache that had nothing to do with business or ambition. Here was the answer to the question that had haunted her all week. This was who was waiting for Ethan Walker when he left the office at 6 o'clock. This was the responsibility more important than career advancement. This was the life he'd built instead of chasing power. "Ms. Carrington?" Natalie blinked, realizing Emma was speaking to her. "Yes?" "Do you have kids?" The question, asked with such innocent curiosity, landed like a physical blow. "No," Natalie said quietly. "No, I don't." "Oh." Emma considered this seriously. "Do you have a dog or a cat?" "Emma," Ethan said gently, "not everyone has time for pets." "That's sad," Emma pronounced with the absolute certainty of childhood. "Everyone should have someone to come home to." An awkward silence fell. Natalie searched for something to say, some way to deflect the uncomfortable truth of a 6-year-old's observation, but before she could formulate a response, Lauren appeared at her elbow. "Miss Carrington, the mayor's ready for photos." "Of course." Natalie seized the escape route gratefully. "It was lovely to meet you, Emma. Your painting is truly impressive." "Thank you." Emma smiled brightly, then turned back to her father, already chattering about another piece of artwork she wanted to show him. As Natalie walked away, she couldn't resist one backward glance. Ethan had lifted Emma onto his shoulders so she could see over the crowd, and the little girl was laughing, pointing at something across the gymnasium. The pure, uncomplicated joy on both their faces was almost painful to witness. The rest of the evening passed in a haze. Natalie smiled for photographs with the mayor, made an appropriately inspiring speech about Carrington Group's commitment to education, and wrote a generous check for the school's art program. But her thoughts kept drifting back to that painting, to the small lit window where a child waited for her father to come home. Everyone should have someone to come home to. Emma's words echoed in Natalie's mind as her driver navigated the evening traffic back to her penthouse apartment. She thought about what would be waiting for her when she arrived. An empty space filled with expensive furniture, designer art, and the kind of carefully curated minimalism that looked beautiful in magazines but felt sterile in practice. No one waiting, no excited voice calling her name, no one whose entire face lit up just because she'd walked through the door. When had she made the choice that led here? Natalie couldn't pinpoint a single moment. It had been a series of small decisions, each one perfectly logical at the time. Staying late at the office instead of meeting friends for dinner. Canceling dates because of important meetings. Letting relationships fade when they demanded more emotional energy than she had left after 80-hour work weeks. She told herself it was temporary, that once the company was established, once she'd proven herself, once she'd achieved the next milestone, she would have time for personal life. But the milestones kept moving. There was always another goal, another acquisition, another competitor to outmaneuver. And now she was 42 years old, professionally successful beyond her wildest dreams, and coming home to an apartment where no one waited. The penthouse felt especially empty that night. Natalie poured herself a glass of wine and stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city spread below her. Somewhere in those thousands of lit windows, Ethan Walker was probably reading his daughter a bedtime story, helping with homework, or talking about her day at school, living the life Natalie had sacrificed for power. She raised her glass in a solitary toast to the man who'd walked away from her twice now, once at the Gala, once at the elementary school, both times because he had somewhere more important to be. For the first time in her carefully constructed adult life, Natalie Carrington wondered if she'd been chasing the wrong kind of success all along. The following Monday arrived with unseasonable rain, the kind of persistent drizzle that turned the city gray and made everything feel slightly melancholic. Natalie arrived at her office earlier than usual, having spent most of the weekend replaying the scene at the elementary school in her mind like a film stuck on loop. She'd built an empire, but a 6-year-old's innocent question had exposed a truth she'd been avoiding for years. She had no one to come home to. The realization sat uncomfortably in her chest as she worked through morning emails, approved budget allocations, and prepared for the 10 o'clock board meeting. She was in the middle of reviewing the TechWise merger documents when her assistant buzzed through. "Ms. Carrington, David Chen is here. He says it's important." "Send him in." David entered looking unusually agitated, carrying a folder that he set on her desk with more force than necessary. "We have a problem." Natalie closed her laptop. "I'm listening." "The Henderson account. You know we've been courting them for months, trying to get them to switch their data management to our systems. It's a $12 million contract." "I'm aware. What's the problem?" "They're about to sign with Stratton Analytics instead." David ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "I just got off the phone with their CFO. Apparently Stratton showed them a market projection model that directly contradicts our recommendations. They're claiming our analysis was too conservative, that we're underestimating growth potential in the Asian markets." Natalie's jaw tightened. Stratton Analytics had been a thorn in her side for years, an aggressive competitor willing to cut corners and overpromise to steal clients. "What does our data say?" "That's what I wanted to talk to you about. I pulled Ethan Walker into an emergency analysis this morning. He's been going through Henderson's portfolio and the Asian market indicators for the last 3 hours. David paused. "You should hear what he found." "Where is he?" "Conference room B. I told him to wait." Natalie stood, smoothing her skirt. "Let's go." They found Ethan in the glass-walled conference room, surrounded by laptops, printouts, and what appeared to be several days' worth of coffee cups. He looked up as they entered, and Natalie noticed the dark circles under his eyes had deepened since Friday night. "Mr. Walker," she said, "David tells me you have insights about the Henderson situation." Ethan stood, gathering his materials with efficient movements. "I do. Stratton's model is fundamentally flawed. They're using outdated manufacturing data and ignoring critical supply chain vulnerabilities in Southeast Asia." He pulled up a chart on the main screen. "Here's what they're not telling Henderson." For the next 20 minutes, Natalie watched Ethan systematically dismantle Stratton's projections. He spoke with quiet confidence, walking them through data points and trend analyses that revealed exactly how Stratton had manipulated their model to show artificially optimistic growth projections. "They're banking on a manufacturing boom in Vietnam and Thailand that the current political climate won't support," Ethan explained, highlighting several graphs. "The regulatory changes happening in both countries will significantly slow foreign investment over the next 18 months. Stratton's model assumes conditions that existed 2 years ago, not the reality Henderson will face if they follow this strategy. How certain are you about this analysis? Natalie asked. Ethan met her eyes directly. 97%. I've cross-referenced 5 different data sources, and they all point to the same conclusion. If Henderson follows Stratton's recommendations, they'll lose approximately 30% of their projected revenue within the first year. David whistled low. That's a disaster waiting to happen. Can you put this into a presentation format? Natalie asked, her mind already racing ahead to strategy. Something we can show Henderson's board? I can have it ready by end of business today, Ethan said. But there's something else you should know. He pulled up another chart, this one showing a complex web of connections. While I was analyzing Henderson's portfolio, I noticed something odd. 3 of our other major clients have similar exposure to these Asian markets. If we don't alert them to these regulatory changes, they could face significant losses too. Natalie leaned forward, studying the data with growing interest. How significant? Combined potential losses across all 3 accounts could exceed $40 million over the next 2 years. But if we advise them to adjust their strategies now, we can help them avoid most of that damage. It'll also demonstrate that our analysis is more rigorous than our competitors, that we're not just telling clients what they want to hear. It was a brilliant observation, the kind of strategic thinking that separated good analysts from exceptional ones. Natalie found herself reassessing everything she'd assumed about Ethan Walker. Yes, he left at 6 o'clock every day. Yes, he'd turned down promotions. But in 3 hours this morning, he'd potentially saved the company from losing a $12 million account and identified a way to strengthen relationships with 3 other major clients. This is exactly what we needed, she said. David, schedule a meeting with Henderson's team for tomorrow. I want to present this personally. And Ethan, excellent work, truly exceptional. A slight smile crossed Ethan's face. Just doing my job, Ms. Carrington. No, Natalie said firmly. This goes well beyond your job description. This is the kind of strategic analysis I'd expect from a senior director, not a mid-level analyst. Say, something flickered in Ethan's expression. Not pride exactly, but perhaps a quiet satisfaction at being recognized. I appreciate that. If there's nothing else, I should get started on that presentation. After he left, David turned to Natalie with raised eyebrows. You see what I mean? That's why I've been trying to promote him for months. The man's wasted in his current position. Then why won't he accept advancement? I told you he values his personal time more than career growth. And honestly, after watching him work this morning, I can't fault him for it. He's more productive in his 40 hours than most of my team is in 60. David paused. Not everyone measures success the same way we do, Natalie. The observation stung more than it should have. Meaning what exactly? Meaning maybe Ethan has it figured out in ways we haven't. He does brilliant work, goes home to his daughter, and doesn't sacrifice one for the other. There's something to be said for that kind of balance. After David left, Natalie stood alone in the conference room, staring at the data still displayed on the screen. Ethan's analysis was thorough, insightful, and potentially worth millions to the company. And he'd done it all in a morning, then planned to leave at 6 o'clock to go home to Emma. She thought about her own schedule, the late nights, the weekend work sessions, the vacations she'd canceled for board meetings. When was the last time she'd left the office at a reasonable hour simply because someone was waiting for her? The answer, of course, was never. That evening, Natalie made a decision that surprised even herself. Instead of working until 9 or 10 as usual, she left the office at 7:30 and drove to an address she'd looked up that afternoon, the small apartment building in a modest neighborhood where Ethan and Emma Walker lived. She sat in her car for several minutes, watching lights glow in windows, people coming and going, children playing in the courtyard despite the earlier rain. It was the kind of neighborhood she'd left behind years ago, when success had meant penthouses and downtown addresses. The kind of place where people knew their neighbors and kids rode bikes on the sidewalks. A figure emerged from the building's entrance, and Natalie recognized the neighbor listed in Ethan's emergency contacts, Angela Martinez, a woman in her 50s carrying a casserole dish. She walked to a car parked near Natalie's and paused, seeming to notice the expensive vehicle that didn't quite fit the neighborhood. Before Natalie could decide whether to drive away or introduce herself, Angela approached her window. Natalie rolled it down. "Can I help you?" Angela asked, not unkindly, but with the wariness of someone protective of her community. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Natalie stopped, unsure how to explain what she was doing here. I work with Ethan Walker. I wanted to make sure I had the right address for some documents I need to send him. It was a transparent lie, and Angela's expression suggested she knew it. You're his boss, the CEO. How did you? Emma talks about you. Says her daddy's boss is a lady who built a whole company by herself. Angela's expression softened slightly. That little girl thinks that's pretty impressive. Natalie felt warmth creep into her cheeks. She's a remarkable child. I saw her artwork at the school fundraiser. She's talented, Angela agreed. Takes after her mother that way. Sarah was an artist, painted the most beautiful murals. A shadow crossed her face. Such a tragedy. What happened? Her mother passed away. 3 years ago, cancer. She fought hard, tried every treatment, but Angela shook her head. Ethan was destroyed. We all thought he'd fall apart, especially with a 3-year-old to care for. But he pulled himself together for Emma, promised Sarah on her deathbed that he'd always be there for their daughter, no matter what. The pieces clicked into place with sudden, painful clarity. The rigid schedule, the refused promotions, the way Ethan had looked at Emma with such fierce, protective love at the art show. He wasn't just a devoted father. He was a widower keeping a promise to the wife he'd lost. I didn't know, Natalie said quietly. Most people at his work don't. Ethan's private about his grief. Angela studied Natalie with shrewd eyes. He's a good man, works hard, loves that little girl more than anything in the world. Whatever documents you need to send him, they can wait until tomorrow. Right now he's reading Emma her bedtime story, and that's more important than any business. The gentle rebuke hit home. You're right. I apologize for intruding. No harm done. Angela's expression gentled. But if you really want to help Ethan, best thing you can do is respect his boundaries. He's built a good life for Emma, and he doesn't need anything disrupting that. As Natalie drove away, Angela's words echoed in her mind. He's built a good life for Emma. Not a prestigious life, or a wealthy life, or an ambitious life. A good life. One centered around love and promises kept. The contrast to her own existence felt almost unbearably stark. The next day's meeting with Henderson's team went better than Natalie could have hoped. She presented Ethan's analysis with the polished confidence of someone who'd spent 20 years convincing skeptical executives, and by the end of the 2-hour session, Henderson's CFO was asking pointed questions about why Stratton Analytics had missed such obvious red flags. This is exactly the kind of rigorous analysis we need, he said, reviewing the data on his tablet. Stratton told us what we wanted to hear. You're telling us what we need to know. There's a big difference. That's always been Carrington Group's philosophy, Natalie said smoothly. We'd rather deliver uncomfortable truths than comfortable lies. It's how we've built long-term relationships with our clients. By the time they left, Henderson had agreed to sign the contract and asked Carrington Group to conduct a comprehensive risk assessment of their entire portfolio. It was a victory that would net the company significantly more than the original $12 million agreement. Back at the office, Natalie stopped by David Chen's department to share the news. She found him in conversation with Ethan, both men studying something on Ethan's monitor. We got Henderson, she announced. David turned with a broad grin. Seriously? They signed? They signed, and they want us to do a full portfolio analysis. Your team should expect additional work coming down the pipeline. Natalie looked at Ethan. Your analysis was the deciding factor. The CFO specifically mentioned how impressed he was with the depth of research. I'm glad it helped, Ethan said simply. It did more than help. It secured one of our biggest accounts of the year. Natalie paused, choosing her words carefully. I know you've declined previous promotions, but I'd like to discuss creating a senior analyst position specifically designed around your skills and your schedule. You could focus on high-level strategic analysis without the management responsibilities or travel requirements that seem to concern you. She watched Ethan's face carefully, looking for some sign of interest. Instead, she saw that same careful neutrality she'd encountered at the gala. That's generous, he said, but I'm satisfied with my current role. Even though you're clearly capable of more? Capability and desire are different things, Ms. Carrington. I appreciate the recognition, but I have everything I need right now. Before Natalie could press further, David's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and grimaced. I need to take this. It's the Singapore office. We'll celebrate the Henderson win later. After David stepped away, Natalie found herself alone with Ethan in the small cubicle space. Around them, the ambient noise of the analytics department continued. Keyboards clicking, quiet conversations, the hum of computers processing data. Can I ask you something? She said. And I'd appreciate an honest answer, not a diplomatic one. Ethan's expression was guarded. All right. Why do you work here? If you're not interested in advancement, if you're content with a mid-level position, why stay at Carrington Group? You could find a similar job anywhere, probably with less pressure and better hours. He was quiet for a long moment, and Natalie thought he might not answer. Then he said, The work is interesting. The pay is fair. And more importantly, the location is 15 minutes from Emma's school. If there's an emergency, I can be there in 20 minutes. That matters to me more than salary increases or impressive titles. Because of the promise you made, Natalie said quietly. To your wife. Ethan's eyes widened slightly. How did you... I spoke with Angela Martinez, your neighbor. Natalie saw the flash of protectiveness cross his face and added quickly, She didn't betray any confidences. I was the one who showed up uninvited, but she made it clear that your life is built around Emma, and I respect that. Then you understand why promotions don't interest me. Emma needs stability. She needs to know that every single day, without fail, I'll be there to pick her up from school, help with homework, make dinner, read bedtime stories. She's already lost her mother. I won't make her feel like she's losing me too by chasing career ambitions that would take me away from her. The conviction in his voice was absolute. Natalie found herself envying the clarity of his priorities, the way he'd chosen what mattered and built his entire life around protecting it. Your wife would be proud, she said softly. Ethan's expression flickered with something painful. I hope so. Sarah was the artist, the dreamer. I was always the practical one, the planner. But she taught me what really matters. Before she died, she made me promise that I wouldn't let grief turn me into someone who just went through the motions. She wanted Emma to have a father who was present, engaged, joyful, even without her there. That's a beautiful promise. It's also a hard one. Some days I want to work myself into exhaustion so I don't have to feel how much I miss her. But then I see Emma's face when I pick her up from school, and I remember why I'm doing this. She deserves a father who chooses her every single day. Natalie felt something crack open in her chest, a longing she'd suppressed for so long she'd almost forgotten it existed. She's lucky to have you. I'm the lucky one, Ethan said simply. Emma is the best thing Sarah and I ever created. Being her father is the most important work I'll ever do. Everything else is just everything else. After that conversation, Natalie couldn't stop thinking about Ethan's words. Being her father is the most important work I'll ever do. She tried to imagine saying something similar, that being a CEO was the most important work of her life. It was true in a way, but it felt hollow compared to the fierce love in Ethan's voice when he spoke about his daughter. The week continued with its usual relentless pace. Natalie negotiated with TechWise Industries, navigated a minor crisis in the European division, and attended a dinner with potential investors. But through it all, she found herself noticing things she'd been blind to before. The way her executive assistant, Lauren, always left exactly at 5:30 because her son had soccer practice. The framed photos on Rebecca's desk showing her wife and their 2 adopted daughters. The fact that Marcus Pendleton, for all his bluster and demands, always flew home on weekends to his family in Connecticut instead of staying in the city. Everyone around her had lives that existed beyond the office walls. Everyone had made room for something other than work. When had she stopped doing that? Or had she ever started? On Thursday evening, Natalie made another impulsive decision. Instead of working late, she left the office at 7 and drove to Oakmont Elementary School. She'd researched the art program and learned that their funding had been cut significantly in recent budget reductions. The annual fundraiser helped, but it wasn't enough to maintain the quality instruction that students like Emma Walker deserved. The next morning, she called the school's principal. Ms. Carrington, what a pleasant surprise, Principal Davis said. I wanted to thank you again for your generous donation at the fundraiser. It made a real difference. I'm calling because I'd like to make another contribution, Natalie said, specifically to the art program. I understand funding has been reduced. That's correct. We had to cut the program from 3 days a week to one, and we lost our art supplies budget almost entirely. Mrs. Patterson has been buying materials out of her own pocket. What would it take to fully restore the program? Not just to previous levels, but to expand it. Better materials, more class time, maybe even a visiting artist program? There was a long pause. Ms. Carrington, that would require a significant investment, probably $200,000 over 3 years. Consider it done. Have your finance department contact my office. I'll have the funds allocated by end of next week. I don't know what to say. This is incredibly generous. There's one condition, Natalie added. The donation must be anonymous. I don't want press coverage or public recognition. This is simply about making sure talented students have the resources they need. After the call ended, Natalie sat at her desk feeling lighter than she had in weeks. It was a small thing in the grand scheme of her wealth. $200,000 barely made a dent in her personal fortune. But somewhere in that school, Emma Walker and dozens of other children would have art classes and supplies and opportunities to develop their gifts. It wouldn't change Natalie's empty apartment or fill the void in her personal life, but it felt like a step toward something, a small choice that prioritized what mattered over what merely looked impressive. The following week brought an unexpected complication. Gerald Thornton appeared in her office unannounced, carrying a bottle of champagne and wearing the satisfied expression of someone about to close a deal. "Natalie, darling, I have wonderful news," he announced, setting the bottle on her desk. "The board has approved the merger. We're officially moving forward with the TechWise acquisition." "That's excellent, Gerald. Thank you for your work on this." "I thought we should celebrate properly. There's a new restaurant in the financial district. Exclusive, very upscale. I made reservations for tonight. Just the two of us." There it was again. The smooth pivot from business to personal, as if professional success entitled him to her time and attention beyond the office. Natalie had deflected dozens of these invitations over the years, but something about Gerald's presumptuous tone grated more than usual. "I appreciate the gesture, but I'll have to decline. I have other plans." Gerald's smile dimmed slightly. "Other plans can be rescheduled. This merger is worth celebrating, don't you think? Unless..." His eyes narrowed with speculation. "Is there someone else? I've heard rumors about you spending time in certain neighborhoods, visiting certain employees." Natalie's blood ran cold. "I don't know what you're implying, but I'd advise you to be very careful with your next words. I'm simply saying that people talk. And it would be unfortunate if speculation started circulating about favoritism or inappropriate relationships with subordinates. Bad for company morale. Bad for your reputation." The threat was barely veiled. Natalie stood slowly, drawing herself to her full height. "Let me be absolutely clear, Gerald. Who I spend time with and where I go are none of your business. If you're attempting to leverage baseless gossip into a dinner invitation, you've badly miscalculated. And if I hear even a whisper of rumors about inappropriate relationships, rumors that we both know have no basis in reality, I will assume they originated with you and respond accordingly." Gerald's face flushed. "I didn't mean to... Yes, you did. Now get out of my office before I reconsider your role in this merger." After he left, Natalie's hands trembled with suppressed rage. The sheer audacity of his threat, the casual assumption that he could manipulate her into compliance, made her want to throw something expensive against the wall. But underneath the anger was something colder and more uncomfortable. The realization that her interest in Ethan hadn't gone unnoticed. Gerald's observation, offensive as it was, contained a grain of truth. She had been spending more time thinking about a mid-level analyst than was strictly professional. The question was why. The answer came to Natalie later that evening as she sat alone in her penthouse, staring out at the city lights that stretched endlessly in every direction. She wasn't attracted to Ethan Walker in any conventional sense. He wasn't charming or ambitious or trying to impress her. He represented something she'd lost somewhere along her climb to the top, the ability to prioritize what truly mattered over what merely looked successful. Ethan had chosen love over ambition, family over power, presence over prestige. And in doing so, he'd achieved something Natalie's billions couldn't buy. A life where someone waited eagerly for him to come home. The realization didn't make her feel better. If anything, it deepened the hollow ache that had taken up residence in her chest since the night of the gala. She poured herself a glass of wine and pulled up her phone, scrolling through her contacts. Hundreds of names, business associates, investors, board members, executives, people who wanted things from her, people she could leverage for strategic advantage, people whose relationships existed entirely within the context of corporate success. Not a single person she could call at 9 o'clock on a Thursday night just to talk. The loneliness hit her like a physical force, so sudden and overwhelming that she had to set down her wine glass before she dropped it. When had this happened? When had she become so isolated that her phone contained hundreds of contacts but not one real friend? Natalie's reflection stared back at her from the darkened window. A successful woman in expensive clothes, sitting alone in a beautiful apartment with no one to share it with. The next morning brought an unexpected crisis. Natalie arrived at the office to find Rebecca waiting outside her door, practically vibrating with agitation. "We have a serious problem," Rebecca said without preamble. "The Williams account just pulled their contract. $3.5 million in annual revenue? Gone." Natalie's stomach dropped. What happened? They got a better offer from Meridian Consulting. Williams' CEO called me personally this morning to apologize, but he said Meridian promised them 15% better returns with half the risk exposure. He felt he had a fiduciary duty to his shareholders to take the deal. That's impossible. No one can guarantee those numbers without taking on significant hidden risk. That's what I told him, but Meridian showed them projections backed by what they claimed was revolutionary predictive analytics. Williams bought it. Rebecca ran a hand through her hair. "Natalie, if we lose Williams, other clients are going to notice. Meridian has been aggressively poaching our accounts for months. This could start a cascade." Natalie's mind raced through options and strategies. "Get David Chen and his best analysts into the war room. I want to know everything about Meridian's methodology, how they're generating these projections, what data they're using, where the weaknesses are. If they're over-promising, we need to prove it before Williams signs anything." "Already done. David's team has been working since 6 this morning." Rebecca paused. "Ethan Walker asked to lead the analysis. He volunteered? He said if Meridian's using flawed models to poach our clients, he wants to expose it. Something about professional integrity and not letting snake oil salesmen damage the industry's credibility." Despite the crisis, Natalie felt a flicker of warmth. Of course, Ethan would care about protecting the integrity of their work, even beyond his own company's interests. "Tell David I'll be down in 15 minutes. I want to see what they've found." The war room, a large conference space reserved for crisis management, looked like the aftermath of an all-night work session when Natalie arrived. Whiteboards covered in equations and flowcharts dominated 3 walls. Laptops and tablets were scattered across the table where David's team sat hunched over data, and the acrid smell of too much coffee hung in the air. Ethan stood at the main whiteboard, marker in hand, explaining something to 2 junior analysts. He'd rolled up his sleeves and loosened his tie, and there was an intensity to his expression that Natalie hadn't seen before, focused, determined, almost fierce. "All right, everyone," David called out. "Ms. Carrington's here. Ethan, show her what you found." Ethan turned, marker still in hand, and met Natalie's eyes. "Meridian's model is sophisticated. I'll give them that. But it's built on a fundamental deception." He pulled up a complex chart on the main screen, layers of data overlapping in patterns that would have been incomprehensible to most people. To Natalie, who'd spent 20 years studying market analytics, it was merely difficult rather than impossible to follow. "They're using a technique called temporal smoothing," Ethan explained. "Basically, they're averaging data across different time periods to hide volatility spikes. It makes their projections look stable and reliable, but it's masking significant risk exposure during market fluctuations." "Can you prove it?" Natalie asked. "I can do better than prove it. I can show exactly when their model will fail." Ethan advanced to the next slide, which showed a timeline marked with red warning indicators. Based on current market conditions and the Federal Reserve's indicated interest rate adjustments, Meridian's projections will start diverging from reality within 3 months. By month 6, clients following their recommendations will be facing losses of 20 to 30%. One of the junior analysts spoke up. "We verified his math across 5 different scenarios. It holds up every time. Meridian's model works great during stable markets, but the second there's any significant volatility, it collapses." "And we're heading into volatility," David added. The Fed's been telegraphing rate increases for months. Anyone with basic economic literacy knows we're not in a stable market cycle. Natalie studied the data, her mind working through implications and strategies. This is good work, but Williams won't care about projections. They need concrete evidence that Meridian's methodology is flawed. Can we demonstrate that using historical data? Already done. Ethan switched to a new presentation, this one showing Meridian's model applied retroactively to the 2020 market conditions. If Williams had followed Meridian's recommendations during the pandemic market disruption, they would have lost 42% of their portfolio value. Our methodology would have limited their losses to 8%. That's damning evidence. It gets better, Ethan said, and something in his voice made Natalie pay closer attention. I did some digging into Meridian's client history. They've had 6 major accounts over the past 3 years. Want to guess how many of them are still clients? None, Natalie said, seeing where this was going. Exactly none. Every single one switched to other consulting firms within 18 months, and 3 of them filed complaints with the SEC about misleading projections. Ethan pulled up documentation showing the complaint history. Meridian settles quickly and quietly, usually with non-disclosure agreements. But the pattern is clear. They overpromise to win contracts, deliver short-term gains using high-risk strategies, then disappear before the inevitable losses hit. The room was silent as everyone absorbed the implications. Rebecca spoke first. If we can show this to Williams, we can show them they're about to sign with a firm that has a perfect track record of abandoning clients right before their recommendations blow up, Natalie finished. Good. Excellent work, all of you. Ethan, I need you to come with me to present this to Williams' board. We're meeting them this afternoon. Ethan's expression shifted, not quite resistance, but clear reluctance. Ms. Carrington, I appreciate the confidence, but I'm not really suited for board presentations. David would be better. David's brilliant, but you found this pattern. You built this analysis. You're the one who should present it. Natalie checked her watch. The meeting is at 2 o'clock. That gives you 3 hours to prepare. I leave at 6, Ethan said quietly. I have to pick up Emma from after-school care. The meeting will be over by 4:30 at the latest. You'll make it with time to spare. She saw him hesitate, weighing commitments against professional obligation. Finally, he nodded. All right, but I'll need access to the full Meridian client files to strengthen the historical analysis. You'll have everything you need. The next 3 hours passed in a blur of preparation. Natalie worked with Ethan to refine his presentation, helping him translate complex analytics into language that would resonate with Williams' board members. She was impressed by how quickly he adapted, taking her suggestions about pacing and emphasis while pushing back when he felt the technical accuracy was being compromised. They need to understand the math, he insisted when Natalie suggested simplifying one of the more complex sections. If we dumb it down too much, they won't grasp why Meridian's approach is fundamentally unsound. They're not analysts, Ethan. Half of them barely understand their own financial statements. Then we explain it in terms they can understand without losing the substance. Watch. He revised the slide, adding a simple analogy about building a house on an unstable foundation. Meridian's model is like constructing a beautiful mansion on sand. It looks impressive until the first storm hits, then everything collapses. Our methodology might be less flashy, but it's built on bedrock. It was perfect, accessible without being condescending, clear without sacrificing accuracy. Natalie found herself genuinely enjoying the collaboration, the back and forth of two minds working toward a common goal. At one point, Rebecca stuck her head in to offer coffee and stopped short, observing them with raised eyebrows. "You two work well together," she commented. "Mr. Walker has strong instincts for presentation," Natalie said. "And Miss Carrington knows how to cut through complexity to find the core message," Ethan added. "It's a good combination." After Rebecca left, Natalie caught Ethan checking his watch again. A subtle gesture, but one she'd learned to recognize. "You're worried about the time." "Emma has a school concert tonight, first-grade music performance. She's been practicing her song for weeks." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "I promised I'd be there." "What time does it start?" 7 o'clock. "But I should be home by 6:30 to help her get ready. She likes to practice one more time before we leave, and she'll want me to help with her hair." The specificity of it, the hair, the final practice session, the exact timing, painted a picture of rituals and routines built around a little girl's needs. Natalie felt that familiar ache in her chest. "You'll make it," she said. "I promise." The meeting with Williams' board was tense from the opening moments. CEO Richard Williams sat at the head of the conference table with his CFO and 3 board members, all wearing expressions that ranged from skeptical to openly hostile. "I appreciate you coming on short notice," Williams began, "but I should be clear. We've already made our decision. Meridian's offer is simply too good to pass up. This meeting is more of a courtesy than a negotiation." "We're not here to negotiate," Natalie said calmly. "We're here to show you why Meridian's offer is too good to be true." "Ethan, if you would." Ethan stepped forward, and Natalie saw him take a breath, centering himself. Then he began to present, and she watched something remarkable happen. The quiet, reserved analyst transformed into a compelling speaker, walking Williams' board through the analysis with clarity and conviction. "Meridian's projections look impressive on the surface," he explained, displaying the comparison charts. 15% better returns, 50% less risk. Those are attractive numbers, but let me show you what they're not telling you about how they generate those projections. For the next 20 minutes, Ethan systematically dismantled Meridian's methodology. He showed them the temporal smoothing technique, demonstrated how it masked volatility, and walked them through the historical data proving how catastrophically the model failed during market disruptions. Williams' CFO leaned forward, studying the screens with growing concern. "You're saying their entire model depends on market stability?" "Not just depends on it, requires it. The moment we hit significant volatility, which the Federal Reserve is practically guaranteeing with their rate adjustment signals, Meridian's recommendations will lead you directly into major losses." "That's a serious accusation," one of the board members said. "It's a factual observation," Ethan replied. "And here's the proof." He pulled up the client history. 6 companies, all abandoned within 18 months, 3 SEC complaints. Meridian's business model is built on short-term gains and quick exits. They're not interested in long-term client relationships because their methodology doesn't support them. The room fell silent. Williams exchanged glances with his CFO, and Natalie recognized the shift in energy. Doubt had entered the conversation. "Why didn't Meridian's references mention any of this?" Williams asked slowly. "Because they only provide references from clients still within the first 12 months, Ethan said, before the model's weaknesses become apparent. And the clients who experienced losses signed non-disclosure agreements as part of their settlements." "Can you verify these SEC complaints?" "I have the documentation here." Ethan distributed folders containing the complaint summaries, settlement records, and analysis of subsequent client portfolio performance. "Everything is publicly available information, just difficult to find unless you know what you're looking for." Williams studied the documents, his expression growing darker with each page. I had no idea. Meridian came with impeccable credentials." "They're very good at first impressions," Natalie said. "But Carrington Group is interested in long-term partnerships, not quick wins. We'd rather tell you uncomfortable truths than comfortable lies." Batul, the CFO, looked up from the documents. "If we had signed with Meridian and followed their recommendations, what would our exposure have been?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "Based on your current portfolio and their proposed strategy, you would have been looking at potential losses of 18 to 25 million over the next 18 months. Our projections are more conservative, but they're also built to weather market volatility. You'll see steady, sustainable growth instead of dramatic spikes followed by catastrophic drops." "Jesus," one of the board members muttered. "We almost walked into a disaster." Williams sat back in his chair looking shaken. "I owe you an apology, Natalie. I should have done more due diligence before considering a switch." "No apology necessary. Meridian is sophisticated in their deception. That's what makes them dangerous." Natalie glanced at Ethan, who was checking his watch with barely concealed anxiety. "If you're willing to stay with Carrington Group, we'd like to propose an enhanced service agreement, more frequent analysis updates, quarterly strategy reviews, and direct access to our senior analytics team, including Mr. Walker here, who I think has demonstrated the kind of rigorous thinking your account deserves." They spent another 30 minutes hammering out the details of the renewed contract, which ended up being worth more than the original agreement. Williams insisted on including provisions for monthly check-ins with Ethan's team, clearly impressed by the depth of analysis. When they finally left the building, Natalie checked the time, 4:45. Ethan would make it home with plenty of time to spare. That was exceptional work, she said as they walked to the parking garage. You saved a major account and potentially prevented Williams from making a catastrophic mistake. I just showed them the data, Ethan said, but there was quiet satisfaction in his voice. You did more than that. You presented complex analysis in a way that made them understand the stakes. That's a rare skill. They reached Natalie's car, where her driver waited. Ethan had taken a company car to the meeting. He paused, seeming to wrestle with something. Can I ask you something? He finally said. Of course. Why does this matter so much to you? Not the Williams account specifically, but all of it. The company, the success, the constant competition. What are you building toward? The question caught Natalie off guard. No one had ever asked her that so directly. I'm building an empire, creating something that will outlast me, making a mark on the business world. But for what purpose? What happens after you've made that mark? Natalie didn't have an answer. The question exposed a void she'd been avoiding for years. I don't know, she admitted. I've spent so long focused on the next milestone that I haven't thought much about the destination. Ethan's expression softened with something that might have been sympathy. Sarah used to ask me similar questions. Before she got sick, I was always chasing the next promotion, the next raise. Thought success meant climbing as high as possible. Then we found out about the cancer, and suddenly none of that mattered. The only thing that mattered was time, how much we had left, how we spent it, who we spent it with. I'm sorry you lost her. Me too. Every single day. He checked his watch again, and this time Natalie saw not just anxiety, but anticipation. But she taught me something important before she died. She said that at the end of our lives, we won't remember the hours we worked or the titles we earned. We'll remember the people who loved us and the moments we showed up for them. Everything else is just background noise. Natalie felt tears prick her eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. That's beautiful. It's true. And it's why I leave at 6 every day. Emma won't remember how many promotions I turned down or how much money I could have made, but she'll remember that I was always there when she needed me, that I kept my promise. You're a good father, Ethan. I'm trying to be. Some days are harder than others. He glanced toward the company car. I should go. Emma will be excited about the concert, and she'll want to tell me everything about rehearsal while I help her get ready. As Natalie watched him drive away, she felt the full weight of her choices settle on her shoulders. She'd built an empire, achieved success beyond most people's dreams, and somehow ended up more isolated than she'd been when she started. That evening, instead of returning to her empty penthouse, Natalie made an impulsive decision. She looked up the address for Oakmont Elementary School and drove there, parking in the visitor lot just as families began arriving for the first-grade music concert. She told herself she was there to see the results of the funding she'd provided for the art program. But the truth was more complicated and more painful to acknowledge. She wanted to see what Ethan had instead of what she'd built. The elementary school auditorium was already filling up when Natalie slipped in through the side entrance. Parents and grandparents claimed seats on metal folding chairs, while children in makeshift costumes peeked through curtains on the small stage. The energy was chaotic but warm. Family members greeting each other, sharing cameras and phone chargers. The ambient buzz of community gathering. Natalie found a seat in the back row, feeling conspicuously alone among the clusters of families. She spotted Angela Martinez sitting near the front, chatting with other neighbors. There were couples holding hands, grandparents with cameras ready, siblings squirming in their seats. And then she saw Ethan. He sat 3 rows from the stage, dressed casually now, in jeans and a button-down shirt, having clearly gone home to change after the Williams meeting. He was engaged in conversation with another parent, laughing at something, completely at ease in this world of school concerts and parent volunteers. This was who he became when he left Carrington Tower. Not the reserved analyst or the brilliant data expert, but simply a father among other parents, part of a community built around children and shared experiences. The lights dimmed and a teacher walked onto the stage to welcome everyone. Natalie barely heard the introductory remarks. She was watching Ethan lean forward in anticipation, his phone ready to record, the kind of focused attention he usually reserved for complex data analysis, now directed entirely toward the stage where his daughter would soon appear. The first graders filed out in 2 lines, wearing construction paper crowns decorated with glitter and markers. Natalie spotted Emma immediately. She stood near the middle of the front row, her crown slightly askew, scanning the audience until she found her father. When their eyes met, her face transformed with joy, and she waved enthusiastically despite the teacher's gentle reminder to keep hands at sides. Ethan waved back, then pointed to his phone and gave her a thumbs up. Emma's smile could have lit the entire auditorium. The children sang 3 songs, their voices sweet and occasionally off-key, forgetting words and giggling through mistakes. It should have been unremarkable, just another elementary school performance indistinguishable from thousands happening across the country that same evening. But watching Ethan watch his daughter, Natalie understood why he'd organized his entire life around moments like this. Emma sang with complete, unself-conscious joy, her small voice carrying the melody while her eyes kept finding her father in the audience, as if drawing courage from his presence. And Ethan looked at her like she was performing at Carnegie Hall, like every slightly off-key note was perfect, like this moment, this simple school concert in a gymnasium that smelled of floor wax and poster paint was exactly where he was meant to be. When the concert ended and families began filing out, Natalie stayed in her seat, watching the reunion scene unfold. Emma launched herself at Ethan, and he caught her easily, lifting her up as she chattered excitedly about the performance. "Did you see me, Dad? Did you see when I remembered all the words to the second song? And my crown stayed on the whole time, not like Jackson's. His fell off during the bow." "You were absolutely magnificent," Ethan said, and the pride in his voice was so genuine, so unconditional, that Natalie had to look away. "The best performance I've ever seen." "Really?" "Really, truly. I recorded the whole thing so we can watch it again at home." "Can we get ice cream to celebrate?" Ethan pretended to consider this very seriously. "Well, it is a special occasion. And you did remember all those words. I think ice cream is definitely in order." Emma squealed with delight, and Angela appeared beside them, camera in hand. "I got some great shots. Emma, you were wonderful, sweetheart. Thank you, Mrs. Martinez. We're going to get ice cream. That sounds perfect. You two have fun." Natalie stood quietly, preparing to leave unnoticed, but Angela caught her eye across the thinning crowd. Recognition flickered across the older woman's face, followed by something knowing and slightly sad. She said something to Ethan, gesturing in Natalie's direction. Ethan turned, Emma still in his arms, and surprise crossed his face when he spotted her. There was no avoiding the encounter now. Natalie walked over, feeling awkward and out of place among the families. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to intrude. I heard there was a concert, and I wanted to—" She stopped, unsure how to explain her presence without sounding pathetic. "Ms. Carrington came to see the art program," Angela said smoothly, providing an exit. "The school has been talking about the generous donation." "You were at the Williams meeting," Ethan said, clearly confused by her appearance here. "I thought you'd still be at the office." "I finished early for once." Natalie looked at Emma, who was studying her with open curiosity. "You were wonderful tonight, Emma. Your singing was beautiful." "Thank you," Emma said brightly. "Did you hear the part where we sang about the seasons? I had a solo line in that one." "I did hear it. You have a lovely voice." Emma beamed, then turned to her father. "Can Ms. Carrington come get ice cream with us?" The question hung in the air, unexpected and complicated. Ethan's expression shifted through several emotions: surprise, uncertainty, something that might have been concern. "I'm sure Miss Carrington has other plans," he said gently. "Actually, I don't," Natalie heard herself say, "but I wouldn't want to intrude on your celebration." "It's just ice cream," Emma said with the simple logic of children. "There's lots of room for extra people at the ice cream shop." Ethan met Natalie's eyes, and she saw him weighing the situation, trying to determine her intentions. She wanted to tell him that she wasn't here to push boundaries or make things complicated. She was here because she was lonely, because watching him live the life she'd sacrificed felt both painful and necessary, because she needed to understand what she'd given up in her pursuit of success. But she couldn't say any of that with his daughter listening. "If you're sure it's all right," she said quietly. "One condition," Ethan replied. "Tonight you're not the CEO, and I'm not your employee. We're just people getting ice cream after a school concert. Can you do that?" The challenge in his voice was clear. Could she step outside her role, even for an hour? Could she exist as just Natalie instead of Ms. Carrington, corporate titan? I can try, she said. The ice cream shop was a small local place called Sweet Dreams, tucked between a hardware store and a dry cleaner in a neighborhood strip mall. It had none of the upscale polish of the establishments Natalie usually frequented. The floor was scuffed linoleum, the tables were mismatched, and the menu was handwritten on a chalkboard behind the counter. But it was clearly beloved by the community. Half a dozen families from the concert had already claimed tables, their children still wearing construction paper crowns while debating flavor choices. Emma pressed her face against the display case, studying the rainbow array of ice cream with the serious concentration of someone making a life-altering decision. I can't choose between cookie dough and mint chocolate chip, she announced. They're both so good. What if you got one scoop of each? Ethan suggested. Can I really? It's a special night. You earned it with that performance. While Emma continued her examination of every available flavor, pointing out swirls and mix-ins to her father, Natalie stood slightly apart, feeling the awkwardness of her presence. She didn't belong here among these families in their comfortable clothes and easy laughter. She was wearing a designer blouse and tailored pants that probably cost more than this entire shop's weekly revenue. What's your favorite flavor? Emma asked, suddenly appearing at Natalie's side. I'm not sure. I haven't had ice cream in a very long time. Emma's eyes widened with shock. That's so sad. How can you live without ice cream? Emma, that's not polite, Ethan said gently. But Dad, she said she doesn't eat ice cream. That's terrible. Despite herself, Natalie smiled. You're absolutely right. It is terrible. What would you recommend? Emma took the question with appropriate seriousness, turning back to study the flavors. Well, if you haven't had ice cream in forever, you should probably start with something really good. The salted caramel is amazing. Or the strawberry cheesecake. Or, ooh, they have birthday cake flavor tonight. Birthday cake it is, Natalie decided. They ordered and claimed a table near the window. Emma sat between her father and Natalie, swinging her legs and attacking her double scoop with focused intensity. Natalie took a tentative bite of her own cone and was surprised by how good it actually tasted, sweet and rich and utterly unpretentious. So, Ethan said, breaking the slightly awkward silence, what made you decide to come to the concert? Natalie had prepared several diplomatic answers on the drive over, but sitting here in this cheerful little shop with Emma between them, those polished responses felt wrong. Honestly, I wanted to see what you have, what you choose every day when you leave the office. Ethan studied her face and she saw understanding dawn in his eyes. Not pity exactly, but a recognition of the loneliness she was trying to articulate. It's just ice cream and a school concert, he said quietly. No, Natalie replied, it's everything. Emma looked up from her ice cream, confused by the sudden shift in tone. What's everything? Nothing, sweetheart, Ethan said quickly. We're just talking about grown-up stuff. Tell Miss Carrington about your art project, the one you're working on with Mrs. Patterson. Emma brightened immediately, launching into an enthusiastic description of a group mural project involving all the first graders. As she talked, gesturing with her ice cream cone and occasionally getting distracted by particularly good bites, Natalie watched the easy affection between father and daughter. The way Ethan listened with complete attention, asked follow-up questions, remembered details from previous conversations about classmates and teachers. This was what he protected so fiercely. This uncomplicated joy, this presence, this ritual of celebrating small victories with ice cream and conversation. And then Jackson accidentally spilled blue paint all over himself, Emma was saying, giggling at the memory. And Mrs. Patterson said it was okay because now he matched the sky we were painting, but he had to wear his gym clothes for the rest of the day. That sounds like quite an adventure, Natalie said. Mrs. Patterson says every day is an adventure if you're paying attention. She's really nice. She let me stay late twice this week to work on my section because I wanted to get the clouds just right. Emma paused, then added, Dad says you gave money to help the art program. That's really nice of you. Natalie glanced at Ethan, surprised. I didn't realize you knew about that. Principal Davis mentioned it. He said an anonymous donor had funded program expansion, but I had a feeling it might be you. Ethan's expression was complicated. That was generous. The school needed it, and Emma's painting at the fundraiser showed real talent. I wanted to make sure students like her had opportunities to develop their gifts. Thank you, Emma said solemnly. Art is my favorite subject. Well, and recess, but mostly art. They finished their ice cream while Emma chattered about school, her friends, the books her father had been reading to her before bed. Natalie found herself relaxing into the conversation, asking questions, and genuinely listening to the answers. Around them, other families came and went, a steady stream of normalcy that felt both foreign and oddly comforting. When Emma began to yawn, Ethan checked his watch. It's getting late, Emma Bean. We should head home. But I'm not tired yet, Emma protested, even as another yawn escaped. You have school tomorrow, and I think someone had a very exciting day and probably needs some sleep. Emma turned to Natalie. Will you come have ice cream with us again sometime? The question, asked with such hopeful innocence, made Natalie's throat tight. I'd like that very much. Promise? Emma, Ethan said gently, a note of warning in his voice. It's all right, Natalie said. I promise. When you have another special performance or celebration, I'll be there if you want me to be. Emma smiled, satisfied, and allowed her father to help her into her jacket. As they walked toward the parking lot, the little girl slipped her hand into Natalie's with the unself-conscious trust of children. The simple gesture nearly undid Natalie's carefully maintained composure. At the cars, they paused. Emma hugged Natalie goodbye with the same enthusiasm she'd shown greeting her father after the concert. Thank you for the ice cream, she said politely. Thank you for inviting me. I had a wonderful time. After Emma climbed into Ethan's car, he lingered for a moment. That was kind of you, spending time with us tonight. It was selfish, actually. I needed to see this, to understand what I've been missing. And do you understand? Natalie looked at the car where Emma was visible through the window, already drowsy against her booster seat. I'm beginning to. You have something real, Ethan. Something that matters in ways my empire never will. You could have this too, you know. It's not too late. Isn't it? I'm 42 years old, married to a company, with no one waiting for me to come home. I've made my choices. Ethan's expression softened with something that looked like compassion. Choices can change. You proved that tonight just by showing up. The Natalie Carrington I met at the Gala would never have come to a school concert or sat in a strip mall ice cream shop. Maybe I'm tired of being that version of myself. Then don't be. Life's too short to spend it becoming someone you don't want to be. He glanced back at his car, where Emma was visibly struggling to keep her eyes open. I should get her home, but Natalie, thank you for tonight, for seeing us, for treating Emma like she matters. She does matter, more than quarterly reports or merger deals or any of the things I spend my days obsessing over. After they drove away, Natalie sat in her own car for a long time, watching families leave the ice cream shop and head to their cars, their lives, their homes where people waited. The contrast to her empty penthouse had never felt more stark. She thought about Ethan's words. Choices can change. Could they? Could she unmake years of decisions, redirect a life built entirely around corporate success, find room for something beyond balance sheets and board meetings? The question followed her home, echoed through her empty apartment, and kept her awake long into the night. The next morning, Natalie arrived at the office with a new sense of purpose, though she couldn't have articulated exactly what that purpose was. She only knew that something had shifted inside her during that simple evening of ice cream and conversation. Rebecca noticed immediately. You look different, she said when she stopped by Natalie's office with the morning briefings. Did something happen? I went to a school concert last night. Rebecca's eyebrows rose. A school concert? You? I know how it sounds. No, it's just, I've worked with you for 8 years, and I don't think you've ever mentioned attending anything that wasn't directly related to business. Rebecca studied her carefully. This is about Ethan Walker, isn't it? Natalie didn't bother denying it. He has a daughter, 6 years old, incredibly bright, full of life, and watching him with her made me realize how much I've sacrificed for this company. Natalie, are you having feelings for him? Because if you are, you need to be very careful. The power dynamic alone. It's not like that, Natalie interrupted. I'm not attracted to Ethan romantically. I'm attracted to what he represents. He chose love over ambition, family over power, and he seems genuinely happy with that choice. And you're not happy with yours. It wasn't a question. Natalie looked at her CFO, her friend of nearly a decade, and felt the walls she'd built around her emotions begin to crack. I have everything I thought I wanted, Rebecca. A successful company, financial security, respect in the business world. But I come home every night to an empty apartment. I eat dinner alone. I have no one to share my victories or comfort me through defeats. And last night, watching a 6-year-old girl hug her father after a school concert, I realized I've been chasing the wrong kind of success my entire adult life. Rebecca was quiet for a long moment. What are you going to do about it? I don't know. That's the problem. I can't exactly unmake 20 years of decisions. No, but you can make different decisions going forward. Rebecca leaned against the desk. You know what I've never told you? When I first started working here, I was just like you. 80-hour weeks, no personal life, completely consumed by work. Then I met Julia at a conference, and she made me choose, the job or her. And I almost chose the job. What changed your mind? She asked me a simple question. When I'm 80 years old and looking back on my life, what do I want to remember? Do I want to remember quarterly earnings reports? Or do I want to remember building a life with someone I love? Rebecca smiled. The answer was pretty obvious once I framed it that way. But you didn't leave Carrington Group. No, I renegotiated my relationship with it. I stopped staying late unless absolutely necessary. I protected my weekends. I made space for Julia and eventually for our daughters. And you know what? I'm better at my job now than I was when I was working 80 hours a week. Because I have perspective, I have balance, I have reasons to be efficient instead of just busy. Natalie absorbed this, turning the idea over in her mind. You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It requires constant vigilance and boundary setting, but it's possible, if you want it to be. Rebecca stood. The question is, what do you want your life to look like? Not what you think it should look like, or what will impress other people. What do you actually want? After Rebecca left, Natalie pulled up her calendar. Meetings from 7 in the morning until 8 at night, every single day for the next 2 weeks. Dinners with investors, conference calls with international offices, strategy sessions with department heads. Not a single hour marked for anything personal. She began making changes, small ones at first, declining a networking dinner, delegating a client meeting to Rebecca, blocking out Thursday evenings for herself with no explanation. Each change felt both terrifying and liberating, like stepping off a treadmill she'd been running on for decades. The following week brought an unexpected crisis that tested Natalie's new resolve. The TechWise merger hit a snag when their CEO suddenly demanded better terms, threatening to walk away from the deal entirely. It was exactly the kind of emergency that would have consumed her completely in the past. Late nights, weekend work sessions, every waking moment dedicated to salvaging the acquisition. Instead, Natalie assembled her team and laid out a different approach. I want solutions by end of business Friday, she told the senior executives gathered in the conference room. But those solutions will be developed during normal business hours. No one is working weekends unless they explicitly volunteer. We're going to solve this problem efficiently, not just by throwing time at it. Marcus Pendleton, the board chairman, looked scandalized. Natalie, this merger is worth $300 million. We can't just work banker's hours and hope. We can, and we will. I've watched this company burn out talented people for years because we equate hours worked with dedication. It's time we prioritize smart work over exhausting work. This is highly irregular, Marcus protested. So is having a CEO who actually goes home at night, Natalie replied calmly. I'm implementing some changes to how we operate. Starting with respecting our employees' personal time. The shocked silence that followed was almost comical. Finally, David Chen spoke up. I think that's a healthy approach. My team will have preliminary analysis ready by Thursday. Thank you, David. Natalie looked around the table. Anyone else have concerns? No one spoke, though several executives exchanged meaningful glances. She knew what they were thinking, that she'd lost her edge, gone soft, allowed personal feelings to interfere with business judgment. Let them think what they wanted. She was tired of sacrificing everything for a company that would replace her within a month if she dropped dead at her desk. That Thursday evening, Natalie left the office at 6:30 and drove to Oakmont Elementary. She'd called ahead and arranged a meeting with Principal Davis, ostensibly to discuss the art program funding. But her real purpose was something else entirely. She found him in his office, surrounded by paperwork, and looking tired but welcoming. "Miss Carrington, please come in. Can I get you coffee?" "No, thank you. I won't take much of your time. I wanted to ask about volunteer opportunities." Principal Davis blinked in surprise. "Volunteer opportunities? Here at the school?" "Yes. I know my schedule is unpredictable, but I'd like to contribute something beyond financial donations. Reading programs, career day presentations, whatever you might need." "That's very generous. We always need volunteers, especially for our literacy program. Many of our students come from homes where English is a second language, and extra reading support makes a tremendous difference. I'd like to help with that. One afternoon a week, if possible. Thursdays would work best for my schedule." They discussed logistics and completed the necessary background check paperwork. As Natalie was preparing to leave, Principal Davis said, "If you don't mind my asking, what brought this on? The donation was already incredibly generous." Natalie thought about how to answer honestly. "I've spent my entire adult life building a company. I'm good at it, and it's brought me success. But recently I've realized that success without purpose feels empty. I want to do something that matters in a more direct way. Something where I can see the impact immediately, not in quarterly reports." "Well, you'll certainly see impact with our students. They're eager learners, and having successful role models volunteer their time means everything to them." He paused. "Emma Walker is in our literacy program, actually. She's an excellent reader herself, but she volunteers to help younger students during her free period. Takes after her father that way, always looking for ways to help others." Of course, Emma was already volunteering. Natalie felt a rush of affection for the little girl and her quiet, devoted father. "That doesn't surprise me at all." Over the next 2 weeks, Natalie implemented more changes to her life and her company. She established firm boundaries around working hours, pushing back against the corporate culture that equated constant availability with commitment. She delegated more responsibilities to her executive team, trusting them to handle crises without her direct involvement in every decision. And every Thursday afternoon, she left the office at 3 o'clock and drove to Oakmont Elementary to read with students. The first session was awkward. Natalie had commanded boardrooms and negotiated billion-dollar deals, but sitting with a 7-year-old struggling through a picture book required entirely different skills. She had to learn patience, encouragement, how to make learning feel like play rather than work. But by the third week, she found her rhythm. The students responded to her genuine interest and her refusal to talk down to them. She asked their opinions about stories, let them choose books that interested them, celebrated their progress with the same intensity she'd once reserved for successful mergers. And slowly, something inside her began to heal. The hollow ache that had haunted her since the Gala started to fill with something warmer and more substantial. Purpose. Connection. The satisfaction of making a direct, visible difference in young lives. She was working with a shy second grader named Maria one Thursday afternoon when Emma Walker appeared in the doorway of the reading room, her eyes widening in surprise. "Ms. Carrington, you're here!" "Hello, Emma. I'm volunteering with the literacy program now." Emma's face lit up with delight. "Really? That's so cool. I help too, but with the kindergartners, they're learning their letters still." "That's wonderful. You must be very patient with them." "My dad taught me how. He says everyone learns at their own pace, and the important thing is to be encouraging." Emma paused. "Are you coming to our art show next week? The big one where parents can come see all our projects?" "I'll be there," Natalie promised. After Emma left, Maria looked up at Natalie with curious eyes. "Is Emma your friend?" "I suppose she is, yes." "She's really nice. She helped me when I was sad about my reading test." "What did she do?" "She told me that her dad says mistakes are just practice for getting it right next time, and that being bad at something now just means you're learning to be good at it later." Maria smiled. "That made me feel better." Natalie felt warmth spread through her chest. Even at 6 years old, Emma was already demonstrating the same quiet wisdom her father showed, the understanding that worth wasn't measured in immediate success, but in steady effort and compassion. That evening, as Natalie drove home, she felt genuinely content for the first time in months. The work wasn't glamorous or prestigious. No one would write articles about her reading sessions with struggling students. But it mattered in ways her corporate victories never had. Her phone rang as she pulled into her building's garage, Rebecca calling with news about the TechWise merger. "We cracked it. Rebecca announced without preamble. David's team found a compromise structure that gives TechWise the control they wanted while protecting our interests. Their CEO signed off an hour ago. That's excellent news. Send my congratulations to everyone involved. There's more. Because we resolved this efficiently instead of dragging it out for weeks, we're actually ahead of schedule. The merger will close a full month earlier than projected, which means we'll see returns faster. See what happens when we work smart instead of just working constantly? Rebecca laughed. Point taken. How was your volunteer session? Rewarding. I'm starting to understand why teachers do this work despite the low pay and long hours. Look at you, developing perspective and balance. I barely recognize you. After they hung up, Natalie sat in her car for a few minutes, processing the day. She'd closed a $300 million merger and helped a 7-year-old gain confidence in her reading abilities. 6 months ago, she would have considered only the merger worth celebrating. Now she wasn't sure which accomplishment felt more significant. The art show the following week was even more elaborate than the fundraiser had been. The entire school gymnasium was transformed into a gallery, with student artwork displayed on professional stands and walls draped with black fabric to create exhibition spaces. Parents and community members wandered through, admiring paintings and sculptures and mixed media projects that represented months of work. Natalie arrived early and found herself drawn immediately to Emma's section. The little girl had created a series of paintings showing the same street scene at different times of day: morning, afternoon, evening, night. The technical skill was remarkable for a 6-year-old, but what struck Natalie most was the emotion in each piece. The morning painting showed people rushing to work, the afternoon captured children playing, the evening depicted families gathering, and the night revealed lit windows where people were safely home. It was titled, A Day of Coming Home. She worked on that for 2 months, a voice said beside her. Natalie turned to find Ethan standing there, looking proud and slightly overwhelmed. It's extraordinary, the way she's captured not just the visual changes, but the emotional arc of a day. Mrs. Patterson says Emma has a gift for seeing the story in everyday moments, that she paints what she feels, not just what she sees. They stood together, studying Emma's work in comfortable silence. Finally, Ethan said, I heard you're volunteering with the literacy program. Thursday afternoons, it's become the highlight of my week. Emma talks about you constantly now. You and the ice cream and the reading program. You've made quite an impression. She's made an impression on me too. She's remarkable, Ethan. You're raising an extraordinary child. I'm trying. Some days I worry I'm not enough, that she needs more than one parent can provide. But then she creates something like this, or comes home excited about helping younger students. And I think maybe Sarah and I did something right before we lost her. The vulnerability in Ethan's voice touched something deep in Natalie's chest. You're more than enough. Anyone can see that. Emma knows she's loved completely, and that's the foundation everything else builds on. Before Ethan could respond, Emma herself appeared, weaving through the crowd with a woman Natalie recognized as Mrs. Patterson, the art teacher. Dad, Miss Carrington, did you see my paintings? All of them? We're looking at them right now, Ethan said, crouching down to her level. And I think they're the best work in the entire show. You have to say that because you're my dad, Emma said, with the logic of children who are beginning to understand bias. But what does Miss Carrington think? Natalie knelt beside them, meeting Emma's eager gaze. I think you have a gift for capturing emotion in your art. These paintings tell a story about home and family and belonging. That's sophisticated work for any artist, let alone someone your age. Emma beamed. Mrs. Patterson says I should keep practicing because I might be a real artist someday, like my mom was. Your mother was an artist? Natalie asked, though she already knew the answer from Angela. She painted murals, Emma said proudly, big ones on buildings. Dad says she made the whole city more beautiful. I want to do that too when I grow up. Mrs. Patterson spoke up, her voice warm. With talent like yours and the dedication you show, I have no doubt you will. And speaking of dedication, Emma, your father tells me you've been helping with the literacy program. I like helping the kindergartners. They're so excited when they figure out a new word. It's like watching them discover treasure. Natalie felt her throat tighten with emotion. This child, this remarkably empathetic, talented, kind child, was the reason Ethan had restructured his entire life. And watching them together, she understood completely. Some things were worth more than corner offices and quarterly profits. The art show continued for another hour, with Emma dragging both adults around to see her classmates' work and introducing Natalie to everyone as my dad's boss, who's also my friend, and helps kids learn to read. Each introduction made Natalie's carefully constructed professional identity feel less important than this new role she'd stumbled into. As the evening wound down and families began departing, Natalie found herself walking out with Ethan and Emma. In the parking lot, Emma yawned widely and leaned against her father's leg. Someone had a big day, Ethan said gently, lifting her up. Say goodnight to Mrs. Carrington, Emma beamed. Good night, Emma murmured, already half asleep. Will you come read with us again next Thursday? I'll be there, Natalie promised. After they drove away, Natalie sat in her car and made a decision that would have seemed impossible just weeks ago. She pulled out her phone and called Rebecca. I need you to schedule a board meeting for next Monday, she said when Rebecca answered. Full board, mandatory attendance. Tell them it's urgent. What's this about? Changes. Big ones. I'll explain Monday, but I wanted to give you advance warning. Things are about to shift at Carrington Group. Should I be worried? No, but you should be prepared for some resistance from Marcus and the old guard. Monday's board meeting began with the usual preliminaries: approval of minutes, financial reports, updates on major initiatives. Natalie let the routine business proceed normally, watching the board members settle into their comfortable patterns. Marcus Pendleton held court at one end of the table, Gerald Thornton preened over the successful TechWise merger, and the other executives presented their departmental updates with practiced efficiency. Then Natalie stood, and something in her posture made the room fall silent. I want to discuss our corporate culture, she began. Specifically, our expectations around working hours, work-life balance, and how we measure employee value. Marcus frowned. Our culture is what's made this company successful. I'm not sure what needs discussing. Our culture is burning out talented people and making them choose between career advancement and personal lives. That's not sustainable, and it's not the legacy I want this company to have. Natalie, where is this coming from? Gerald asked, his tone condescending. We've always operated on the principle that success requires sacrifice. And I'm questioning that principle. I've spent weeks observing one of our employees, a brilliant analyst who consistently produces exceptional work while maintaining strict boundaries around his personal time. He's proven that you don't have to sacrifice everything to be valuable to this company. You're talking about Walker, Marcus said flatly, the one who keeps turning down promotions. I'm talking about an employee who's found balance, and I think we should learn from his example rather than penalizing it. Natalie pulled up a presentation on the main screen. I've had HR compile data on employee retention, productivity, and satisfaction over the past 5 years. The results are striking. The charts showed clear patterns. Departments with the longest average working hours had the highest turnover and the most sick days taken. Conversely, teams that maintained better work-life balance showed higher productivity per hour worked and better retention rates. David Chen's analytics team is a perfect example, Natalie continued. He implemented flexible scheduling 2 years ago, and his department's output increased by 23%, while turnover dropped by 40%. People do better work when they're not exhausted. Rebecca spoke up, supporting Natalie's position. I've seen the same pattern in finance. When I stopped expecting my team to work weekends routinely, the quality of their analysis improved significantly. This is absurd, Gerald interjected. We're not running a charity. We're running a competitive corporation. If people can't handle the demands, they should find easier jobs. Or, Natalie said calmly, we could recognize that demanding 80-hour weeks is a failure of management, not a badge of honor. It means we're inefficient, not dedicated. The argument escalated, with the board splitting into factions. Marcus and Gerald led the opposition, insisting that relaxing standards would make Carrington Group soft and vulnerable to competitors. Others, particularly the younger board members and those with families, sided with Natalie's position. Finally, Natalie played her trump card. I'm proposing a pilot program in 3 departments: analytics, finance, and operations. We'll implement strict limits on expected working hours, provide better support for employees with families, and measure productivity and satisfaction over 6 months. If the results show decreased performance, we'll revisit the policy. But I believe we'll see improvements across all metrics. And if the board votes this down, Marcus challenged, Then I'll implement it anyway as an executive decision, but I'd prefer to have board support. The vote was closer than Natalie had anticipated. 7 in favor, 5 against. But it passed, and with it came the first major cultural shift in Carrington Group's 20-year history. After the meeting, Rebecca cornered Natalie in the hallway. That was risky. Marcus looked ready to explode. Let him. I'm tired of building success on the backs of people who sacrifice their families for corporate profits. This is really about Walker, isn't it? About what he showed you. It's about recognizing that we've been measuring success wrong. Ethan Walker is happy. Genuinely, deeply happy. He has a daughter who adores him, a life that feels meaningful, work that satisfies without consuming him. Meanwhile, I have billions of dollars and come home to an empty apartment every night. Which one of us has actually succeeded? Rebecca's expression softened. I'm glad you're figuring this out. But Natalie, be careful. Making corporate policy changes is one thing. Getting personally involved with an employee. I'm not pursuing Ethan romantically. I'm learning from his example. There's a difference. I hope you're right, because the way you talk about him, the way your whole face changes when his name comes up, it looks like more than professional admiration. After Rebecca left, Natalie stood alone in the corridor, her friend's words echoing uncomfortably. Was she developing feelings for Ethan? The question had haunted her for weeks, but she'd convinced herself that what she felt was envy for his lifestyle, not attraction to the man himself. But standing there in the empty hallway, she forced herself to be honest. Yes, she admired Ethan's choices. Yes, she wanted the kind of balanced life he'd built, but she also found herself thinking about him constantly, looking forward to Thursdays when she might glimpse him at the school, treasuring the rare moments of conversation they shared. It didn't matter. Ethan had made his priorities clear, and romance, especially with his boss, wasn't among them. He was devoted to Emma, committed to keeping the promise he'd made to his dying wife. There was no room in that carefully constructed life for complications. The pilot program launched the following week, and predictably, it caused upheaval. Some employees embraced the new policies enthusiastically, finally able to attend their children's events or maintain personal commitments without guilt. Others, particularly those who'd built careers on constant availability, resisted the changes. David Chen's department adapted smoothly, having already established flexible practices. But the operations team struggled initially, with middle managers complaining that the new policies made scheduling difficult. Natalie spent hours meeting with department heads, troubleshooting problems, and defending the program against internal resistance. It was exhausting work, made harder by Marcus Pendleton's barely concealed sabotage attempts. Through it all, Ethan continued his quiet routine, arriving at 7:30, leaving at 6, producing exceptional work within his carefully bounded schedule. He became an unintentional symbol of the policy's success, proof that excellent performance didn't require sacrificing personal life. 3 weeks into the pilot program, Natalie received an unexpected visitor. Angela Martinez appeared in her office lobby, looking determined and slightly nervous. "Ms. Martinez," Natalie said, surprised, when her assistant showed the older woman in. "Is everything all right? Is Emma—" "Emma's fine. I'm here about something else." Angela sat down, folding her hands primly in her lap. "I want to talk to you about Ethan." Natalie's heart rate kicked up. "Has something happened?" "That depends on your perspective. Ethan doesn't know I'm here, and he'd probably be upset if he found out. But I've known that boy since Emma was born, and I've watched him struggle these past 3 years. He needs someone to speak truth to him, and since he won't listen to me, I thought maybe you could help. I'm not sure what you think I can do." "You can stop tiptoeing around your feelings for him." The blunt statement left Natalie momentarily speechless. "I don't have feelings. We're colleagues, and I admire his work ethic, but please don't insult my intelligence," Angela interrupted gently. "I've seen how you look at him. More importantly, I've seen how you look at Emma. You care about them both, and you're too afraid of disrupting his life to admit it. Even if that were true, Ethan has made his priorities clear. He's devoted to Emma and to the promise he made to his wife. I respect that too much to interfere." "Here's what you don't understand about that promise." Angela leaned forward, her expression intense. "I was there when Sarah died. I held her hand while Ethan stepped out to check on Emma, and I heard what she actually said to him." Natalie waited, almost afraid to hear what came next. Sarah didn't just make Ethan promise to always be there for Emma. She made him promise not to let grief turn him into a ghost. She told him that Emma needed a father who was fully alive, who could model joy and love and connection. She wanted him to find happiness again, to show their daughter that love doesn't end when we lose someone. It grows and transforms and makes room for new people. Ethan told me the promise was about being present for Emma. That's part of it, but he's interpreted it so narrowly that he's used it as a shield against any kind of personal life. He works, he parents, and he exists in this carefully controlled routine where nothing unexpected can hurt him. That's not what Sarah wanted. She wanted him to live, not just survive. Natalie absorbed this, her mind racing. Why are you telling me this? Because in the 3 years since Sarah died, I haven't seen Ethan show genuine interest in anyone. Until you. He mentions you to Emma all the time, about things you said at work, ideas you had, changes you're making at the company. And Emma adores you. That child has been asking when you're coming over for dinner for the past 2 weeks. Angela, I can't just... The power dynamic alone makes this impossible. I'm his boss. Pursuing anything beyond professional friendship would be inappropriate. Then maybe that's something you need to change. Angela stood, preparing to leave. I'm not saying you should march into his life and demand a relationship. I'm saying you should be honest about what you feel, and give him the chance to be honest too. Ethan has spent 3 years making every decision based on what's safe and predictable. Maybe it's time someone reminded him that the best parts of life are neither of those things. After Angela left, Natalie sat in her office for a long time, staring at the city spread below her windows. The conversation had shaken something loose inside her, a truth she'd been avoiding since the night of the gala. She was falling for Ethan Walker. Not because he was charming or ambitious or trying to impress her, because he was kind, devoted, principled, because he'd chosen love over power and somehow ended up richer than she'd ever be. And more terrifying, she was falling for Emma too, for the little girl's brightness and empathy, for the way she saw good in everyone, for the art she created and the joy she radiated. The question was what to do about it. The following Thursday, Natalie arrived at Oakmont Elementary for her usual volunteer session to find a note waiting for her. Emma Walker had requested her help with a special project. Could she please come to the art room instead of the literacy center? Natalie found Emma there with Mrs. Patterson, surrounded by painting supplies and looking nervous. Hi, Ms. Carrington, Emma said. I wanted to ask you something important. I'm listening. There's a mother-daughter art workshop next month. It's for families to make art together. Emma twisted her hands together anxiously. I don't have a mother, so usually I sit out. But Mrs. Patterson said I could invite someone else if I wanted, someone important to me. Natalie's throat constricted. Emma? Would you come with me? To the workshop? You don't have to be my mom or anything, just someone who cares about art and about me, if you want to. The hope and vulnerability in Emma's voice nearly broke Natalie's composure. She looked at Mrs. Patterson, who nodded encouragingly, then back at the little girl waiting for an answer. I would be honored, Natalie said softly. Thank you for asking me. Emma's face lit up with joy so pure it was almost painful to witness. She launched herself at Natalie in an enthusiastic hug. Thank you, thank you. I'm going to plan the best project. We're going to make something amazing together. That evening, Natalie received a phone call from Ethan. His voice was careful, controlled. Emma told me about the mother-daughter workshop. I wanted to make sure you understood what you were agreeing to. If it's too much, if you were just being polite. I meant it, Ethan. I'd be honored to participate with Emma. She's getting attached to you. If you're not planning to be part of her life long-term, it would be kinder to set boundaries now rather than let her get hurt later. The implicit question hung in the air between them. Natalie took a breath, choosing honesty over safety. I'm planning to be part of her life for as long as she wants me there, and part of yours too if you'll allow it. Silence stretched across the line. Finally, Ethan said, What are you saying, Natalie? I'm saying that I care about both of you. That these past weeks of getting to know Emma, seeing you as a father instead of just an employee, it's changed something fundamental in me. I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give, but I need you to know that my interest in your lives goes beyond professional courtesy. I'm not looking for a relationship. Emma and I, we're enough for each other. I know. And if friendship is all you're willing to offer, I'll take it. But Angela came to see me. She told me what Sarah actually asked of you before she died. Another long silence. When Ethan spoke again, his voice was rough with emotion. Angela had no right. She was worried about you, about both of you. She thinks you've interpreted Sarah's promise so narrowly that you're protecting yourself from living fully. What I'm doing is keeping my daughter's life stable. She's already lost her mother. I won't add more instability by bringing complicated relationships into her world. Emma asked me to the workshop, Ethan. She made that choice. And from what Angela said, your daughter needs to see that love can grow and change, that opening your heart to new people doesn't diminish what you had with Sarah. This isn't fair, Ethan said quietly. You're my boss. The power dynamic alone makes this impossible. Then I'll resign. The words left Natalie's mouth before she'd fully thought them through, but once spoken, she knew they were true. If the only thing stopping us from exploring what this could be is my position at the company, then I'll step down. Rebecca can take over as CEO. She's more than qualified, and honestly, the company will probably run better under her leadership anyway. You can't seriously be suggesting you'd give up Carrington Group for, what, the possibility of a relationship with a widowed single father and his 6-year-old daughter? I'm suggesting I'd give up Carrington Group to have a chance at the kind of life you've built. The kind where someone waits for you to come home. Where success is measured in bedtime stories and school concerts instead of quarterly earnings. I've spent 20 years building an empire, Ethan, and it's left me empty. What you have, what you and Emma have, is worth more than every dollar in my bank account. She heard him breathing on the other end of the line, could almost feel him struggling with the enormity of what she was offering. I can't ask you to give up everything you've built, he finally said. You're not asking. I'm choosing. The same way you chose Emma over every promotion and opportunity, I'm choosing what matters. I need time to think about this, to figure out what's right for Emma. Take all the time you need. I'll be here. After they hung up, Natalie sat in the growing darkness of her penthouse, her heart racing. She'd just offered to resign from the company she'd spent 2 decades building. The rational part of her mind screamed that she was being reckless, throwing away everything for a man who hadn't even said he wanted a relationship. But the deeper, quieter part of her, the part that had been slowly awakening over these past weeks, knew she'd made the right choice. Carrington Group would survive without her. The world would keep turning, deals would keep closing, profits would keep accruing. But if she didn't take this chance, if she didn't reach for the kind of connection she'd witnessed between Ethan and Emma, she'd spend the rest of her life wondering what she'd missed. The next week passed in strange limbo. Natalie continued her volunteer work at the school, attended the mother-daughter workshop planning meeting with Emma, and went through the motions of running her company. But her mind was elsewhere, waiting for Ethan's decision. She began quietly preparing for the possibility of resignation, documenting her projects, and bringing Rebecca into deeper strategic conversations. Her CFO noticed immediately. You're serious about this, Rebecca said one afternoon, studying Natalie across her desk. You're actually considering stepping down. I'm more than considering it. I'm planning for it. Because of Ethan Walker. Because of what he represents. Because I've realized that everything I've built here is meaningless if I have no one to share it with. You have Julia and your daughters. David has his family. Marcus goes home to Connecticut every weekend. Even Gerald, for all his faults, has people waiting for him. I have an empty apartment and a company that will replace me within weeks if I drop dead. That's not true. You've built something remarkable here. I've built a successful business, but I haven't built a life, and I'm tired of pretending those are the same thing. The mother-daughter workshop arrived before Ethan had given Natalie an answer. She met Emma at the school on Saturday morning, both of them wearing old clothes appropriate for painting. The little girl vibrated with excitement, showing Natalie the project she'd planned, a collaborative mural depicting their favorite places in the city. I want to paint the ice cream shop, Emma explained, and the art museum, and the park where Dad takes me to feed ducks. What places do you want to add? Natalie thought about it. The school library, where we read together on Thursdays, and maybe the view from Carrington Tower at sunset, the way the whole city looks golden. They worked side by side for 3 hours, paint covering their hands and clothes, Emma chattering continuously about colors and composition, while Natalie rediscovered the simple joy of creating something with no business purpose or strategic value. Just art for the sake of art, connection for the sake of connection. Other mother-daughter pairs worked around them, some biological families, some adoptive, some clearly grandmother-granddaughter or aunt-niece. What mattered wasn't the legal relationship, but the love evident in shared laughter and collaborative creation. As they painted, Emma said quietly, "My mom used to paint with me like this, before she got sick." Natalie's hand stilled on the brush. "She did?" "Every Saturday morning. She'd set up her easel in our living room and I'd have my little table next to her. We'd paint together and listen to music and talk about everything." Emma added yellow highlights to the windows of the ice cream shop. "I miss her a lot." "I'm sure you do, sweetheart. But having you here makes it hurt less. Not because you're replacing her, you can't replace moms, but because it's nice to have someone who likes art and listens when I talk and doesn't mind getting paint on everything." Natalie felt tears threaten and blinked them back. "I love spending time with you, Emma. You've taught me so much about what really matters in life." "Well, what have I taught you?" "That success isn't about how much money you make or how high you climb. It's about showing up for people you care about, being present, keeping promises. Your dad showed me that first, but you've shown me what it looks like from the other side, what it means to be someone's whole world." Emma considered this seriously while adding blue to a painted sky. "You're part of my world now, too. You and Thursday reading time and ice cream and art workshops. I told Dad that you're family now, even if it's a different kind of family than most people have." "What did your dad say?" "He said families come in all different shapes, and the important thing is that people love each other and show up when it matters." Emma paused. "He's scared, though." "Scared of what?" "Of letting new people into our life. Because when Mom died, it hurt so much. I think he's worried that if he loves someone again and loses them, it'll break him. And then who would take care of me?" The wisdom in Emma's observation, delivered with the matter-of-fact clarity of children, left Natalie momentarily speechless. "Your dad is very brave, Emma, raising you alone, keeping his promises, building a good life from something so painful. But sometimes the bravest thing isn't protecting yourself from hurt. It's opening your heart anyway." By the time they finished their mural, paint covered both of them, and the collaborative artwork showed a vibrant city full of meaningful places, the locations where Emma and Natalie had built their unexpected friendship. As they cleaned up, Emma said, "Can I ask you something? Do you want to be part of our family? Like, really part of it, not just friends?" Natalie knelt down, meeting Emma's eyes directly. "I would love that more than anything, but it's complicated, sweetheart. Your dad needs to be ready for that too." "He is ready. He's just scared to admit it." "How do you know?" "Because he smiles when he talks about you, and he's been happier these past weeks than he's been since Mom died. And when I told him I asked you to the workshop, he looked scared but also happy, the way he looks when we're about to do something fun but a little scary, like riding a roller coaster." That evening, Natalie received a text from Ethan. "Can we talk? In person?" They met at a small coffee shop near his apartment, a neighborhood place that Emma had pointed out in her mural. Ethan looked tired but determined, his hands wrapped around a coffee cup he didn't drink from. "Emma told me about your conversation today," he began, "about families and being brave and opening hearts. She's an incredibly perceptive child. She gets that from Sarah." He finally met Natalie's eyes. "I've been thinking about what you said, about resignation and choosing what matters and taking chances." Natalie waited, hardly breathing. "I can't let you resign from Carrington Group," Ethan continued. "That company is your legacy, your life's work. Giving it up for a relationship that might not even work, that's not fair to you." Her heart sank, but she kept her voice steady. "I appreciate your concern, but it's my choice to make." "I'm not finished." He set down his coffee cup. "I can't let you resign because I'm the one who should leave. I've been offered positions at other companies before, places that would pay more and give me the same flexibility. I could make that change, remove the power dynamic entirely." "Ethan, no. You chose Carrington Group specifically because it's close to Emma's school. You can't give that up. There are other schools, other neighborhoods. Emma's adaptable, and she'd be excited about a new adventure if it meant—" He stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. "If it meant we could really explore what this is between us." "What is this between us?" Natalie asked quietly. "I don't fully know yet. But I know that I think about you constantly, that Emma lights up when she talks about you, that for the first time since Sarah died, I can imagine my life expanding instead of just maintaining the status quo. He reached across the table, taking her hand tentatively. I'm terrified, Natalie. Terrified of letting someone new into Emma's life and having it not work out. Terrified of betraying Sarah's memory. Terrified of opening my heart and having it broken again. I'm terrified too. I've never been a mother or even thought about being one. I don't know how to be what Emma needs. And the thought of failing her, of letting either of you down, Natalie's voice caught. But I also know that what I feel when I'm with you both is more real than anything I've experienced in 20 years of corporate success. Ethan's thumb traced circles on her hand. Sarah used to say that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing the right thing even when you're scared. And maybe the right thing here is to stop protecting ourselves and see what we could build together. Are you sure? Because I won't do this halfway. If we start down this path, I'm all in. Emma deserves stability, not someone who's going to bail when things get difficult. I know. That's what I've been wrestling with this past week. But watching Emma with you at the workshop today, seeing how happy she was, I realized that protecting her from potential hurt was actually depriving her of potential joy. She needs to see that love can grow, that our family can expand without diminishing what Sarah and I built together. Natalie felt tears finally escape, streaming down her face. So what happens now? Now we take it slow. We see each other outside of work, get to know each other in contexts beyond corporate crises and school events. Emma's already attached to you, but we need to make sure this is something sustainable, not just an exciting novelty. And your job? I'll stay at Carrington Group for now, as long as you're comfortable with that. If things develop between us and the power dynamic becomes problematic, we can revisit. But you're right that my location matters for Emma's stability. They sat in the coffee shop for hours after that, talking about logistics and fears and hopes, about how to navigate a relationship that included a 6-year-old daughter, how to honor Sarah's memory while building something new, how to balance corporate responsibility with personal needs. When they finally left, Ethan walked Natalie to her car. In the parking lot, under streetlights that cast everything in amber glow, he pulled her into an embrace that felt like coming home. Thank you for being patient with me, he said softly. For seeing value in a life I was starting to think was too small. Your life isn't small. It's focused on what matters. You just taught me the same lesson. The next months unfolded with careful intention. Natalie and Ethan dated in the traditional sense. Dinners after Emma was asleep, weekend activities with all three of them. Gradual integration of their separate lives into something shared. It wasn't always smooth. Emma had moments of jealousy and fear that Natalie was replacing her mother. Natalie struggled with the demands of parenting a young child after years of corporate freedom. Ethan wrestled with guilt and the fear of betraying Sarah's memory, but they worked through each challenge with honesty and patience. Emma learned that loving Natalie didn't diminish her love for her mother. Natalie discovered that being part of Emma's life brought more satisfaction than any business success ever had, and Ethan slowly released his grip on grief, allowing joy back into his carefully controlled world. The pilot program at Carrington Group showed remarkable results after 6 months. Productivity was up across all 3 departments, retention had improved significantly, and employee satisfaction surveys revealed dramatic positive shifts. Even Marcus Pendleton grudgingly admitted that the policies seemed to be working. Natalie implemented them company-wide, establishing Carrington Group as a leader in work-life balance and family-friendly corporate culture. The business press wrote articles about the transformation, though Natalie deflected credit to her team, and particularly to the unnamed employee whose example had inspired the changes. 1 year after the gala where they'd first met, Natalie and Ethan stood in Oakmont Elementary's gymnasium for another art show. This time, Emma's display included a painting titled My Family, showing 3 figures, a man, a woman, and a child, standing together under a star-filled sky. She asked me if it was okay to paint you as part of our family, Ethan said quietly, standing beside Natalie. I told her it absolutely was. What do you think Sarah would say? Natalie asked. About all of this? I think she'd be happy that Emma has another person who loves her unconditionally, and I think she'd be grateful that you helped me remember how to live instead of just survive. He took Natalie's hand, no longer tentative about the gesture. I spent 3 years keeping a promise to always be there for Emma, but I'd interpreted it so narrowly that I was only half present. You've helped me understand what Sarah actually wanted, for both of us to have full, joyful lives. Emma appeared, pulling them toward her artwork with typical enthusiasm. Come see, I painted all the important moments from this year. The piece was a series of connected scenes. Ice cream at Sweet Dreams, reading together at the library, the mother-daughter workshop, Sunday mornings making pancakes in Ethan's small kitchen, hiking trips in nearby state parks. Each scene glowed with color and warmth and unmistakable love. It's called The Year Everything Changed, Emma announced proudly. Because that's what happened. Everything changed, but in a good way. Natalie crouched beside her, studying the painting with genuine admiration. It's absolutely beautiful, Emma. You've captured something special here. Mrs. Patterson says I'm getting really good at painting emotions, not just things. And this year was full of happy emotions. Emma hugged Natalie impulsively. I'm glad you came to Dad's work party, even though you were wearing that scary boss face at first. My scary boss face? Natalie laughed. The one you use in meetings when people are being silly. Dad told me about it. But then you met me and started doing art and reading with kids, and now you have a happy face most of the time. That evening, after Emma was asleep in her room, Natalie and Ethan sat on his small apartment balcony, looking out at the city lights Emma loved to paint. It was nothing like the view from Natalie's penthouse, but somehow it felt more beautiful, more real, more meaningful. I've been thinking about making some changes, Natalie said, to my living situation. Oh? Ethan kept his voice carefully neutral. The penthouse is beautiful, but it's not really a home. It's more like a very expensive hotel room. I was thinking about selling it and finding something more suitable for family life. Maybe in this neighborhood, close to Emma's school. Ethan turned to look at her, hope and uncertainty warring in his expression. That's a big change. I've made bigger ones this year. Besides, I've realized something. Home isn't a place. It's wherever you and Emma are. Everything else is just details. Is that a hint that you'd like to be around more often? It's more than a hint. It's a statement of intent. Natalie took his hand. I love you, Ethan. And I love Emma. And I know it's only been a year and maybe it's too soon to be thinking about real permanence, but he kissed her then, soft and gentle and full of promise. When they pulled apart, his eyes were bright with emotion. It's not too soon. I love you too. And Emma adores you, and the thought of building a life together, of expanding our little family, it's what I want, what we both want. You're sure? Because this is forever. I don't do anything halfway. I'm sure. Sarah taught me that life is precious and short and should be lived fully. You've taught me that it's possible to honor the past while building toward the future. And Emma has taught both of us that love doesn't divide, it multiplies. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the city breathe below them. Somewhere in those thousands of lit windows were other families, other people finding their way toward connection and meaning. But this window, this small balcony, this quiet moment, this was Natalie's whole world now. She thought about the woman she'd been a year ago, standing in that glittering ballroom, powerful and successful, and utterly alone. That Natalie would never have believed she'd end up here, sitting on a modest apartment balcony with a data analyst, planning a future that included school concerts and ice cream traditions and bedtime stories. But that Natalie hadn't understood what real success looked like. She'd measured it in dollars and deals and corporate victories. She hadn't known that true wealth was a 6-year-old's laughter, a partner who chose presence over prestige, a life built on love instead of ambition. 6 months later, Natalie stood in a small church, not for religious service but for Emma's elementary school assembly, watching the little girl receive an award for her artwork. Emma had won a citywide competition with a painting titled Coming Home, showing 3 figures entering an apartment building, their faces turned toward each other with unmistakable joy. Beside Natalie, Ethan held her hand and beamed with pride. On her other side sat Angela Martinez, dabbing her eyes with a tissue and muttering about how Sarah would have loved this moment. After the ceremony, Emma ran to them, clutching her ribbon and certificate. Did you see? Did you see? I won. Well, we saw, sweetheart, Natalie said, pulling her into a hug. We're so incredibly proud of you. I couldn't have done it without all our time painting together. and Dad helping me with composition, and Mrs. Patterson teaching me about light and shadow. Emma looked up at them both. It takes a lot of people to make good art, and it takes a lot of people to make a good family. That evening, in the new house Natalie had purchased 3 blocks from Emma's school, a modest place by her previous standards, but perfect for their expanding family. They celebrated with homemade pizza and ice cream for dessert. Emma's artwork covered the refrigerator and walls, her awards and certificates displayed with pride. As Natalie helped Emma get ready for bed, the little girl said, "Can I ask you something important?" "Of course. If you and Dad get married someday, could I call you Mom? Not instead of my first mom, but like my second mom. Some kids at school have 2 moms, and they say it's really nice." Natalie's throat constricted with emotion. "If that's what you want, I would be honored beyond words, but only if you're comfortable with it." "I am, because even though I loved my first mom, and always will, having you as my second mom makes our family bigger and happier. Like Dad says, love multiplies." After Emma was asleep, Natalie found Ethan in the kitchen, cleaning up from dinner. She wrapped her arms around him from behind, resting her head against his shoulder. "Emma asked if she could call me Mom," she said quietly. "When and if we get married." She felt Ethan's sharp intake of breath. "What did you say?" "I said I would be honored. Was that all right? I didn't want to overstep." He turned in her arms, cupping her face in his hands. "It's more than all right. It's perfect. You've been her mother in every way that matters for months now. The title is just recognition of something that's already true. I never thought I'd have this. A family, people waiting for me to come home, someone whose whole face lights up when I walk through the door. You have it now. We both do." Ethan kissed her softly. "Thank you for being brave enough to walk away from everything you'd built to take a chance on us." "I didn't walk away from everything. I walked toward what actually mattered. There's a difference." Later that night, Natalie stood in Emma's doorway, watching the little girl sleep. In the soft glow of the nightlight, she could see the rise and fall of Emma's breathing, the peaceful expression on her face, the stuffed animals arranged carefully around her. This was real success, not the corner office or the quarterly profits or the business empire. The sleeping child who called her Mom, this man who'd taught her that strength meant choosing love over ambition, this family they'd built from loss and loneliness, and the courage to try again. Natalie thought about the question Ethan had asked her a year ago. What are you building toward? Now she knew. She was building a life where people waited for each other to come home, where promises were kept and love multiplied and success was measured in bedtime stories and school concerts and ice cream celebrations. She was building what mattered, and it was worth more than everything she'd sacrificed to achieve it. In the quiet of that small house, with her family sleeping peacefully nearby, Natalie Carrington finally understood the answer to the question that had haunted her since the gala. Real strength wasn't power or wealth or corporate dominance. It was the quiet devotion of a father keeping his promise, the unconditional love of a child learning to trust again, and the courage to place love above everything else, even the empire she'd spent 20 years building. And standing there in the doorway, Natalie knew with absolute certainty that she'd made the right choice, the only choice that really mattered. She'd finally come home.